Chapter 1679. When Long Yu made up his mind to raise his compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text to level 13, he felt as if his mind was completely immersed in the current environment of the Shrine of Shadows. This sort of unparalleled intimacy was something he'd never encountered in the past, and it caused him to feel a trace of gratification in his heart. Feeling the speed at which his ball of Netherworld's divine ability was transforming was ceaselessly increasing, he knew that he hadn't made the wrong decision. After all, the process of raising his compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text was irreversible, and he had no way of returning it to level 12 compatibility. Hence, once he raised it, it would never return. Of course, there were no downsides to improving his compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text, but the downside was that his compatibility with the other divine texts had finally been weakened. Originally, apart from his darkness attribute divine text that had reached level 12, his other divine texts had basically all reached level 10. Now, however, all of them had suddenly fallen to level 9. Now, the power of Long Yu's spatial divine text and berserker divine text was even weaker than before. This kind of change was still relatively fatal to a cultivator. Fortunately, Long Yu had the Nether Dragon Blade, which contained water-type primordial power and could use void traversal techniques, so Long Yu's need for spatial divine text wasn't particularly great. Moreover, Long Yu could now use the Nether Dragon Blade to activate the Archean Bridge of Rain, so it wouldn't affect the decline in his strength. On the whole, Long Yu hadn't suffered much, but after reaching level 13 compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text, his entire body had undergone a transformation. For ordinary cultivators, level 12 compatibility with the divine text was already the peak, and there was no way to improve it further. Hence, its power was relatively limited. However, if one could rely on a relatively high-level secret cultivation technique to raise the compatibility from level 12 to level 13, then the cultivator's power would undergo a qualitative change when he used the darkness attribute divine text. As for what kind of transformation it would be, it would vary from person to person. Moreover, right now, Long Yu wasn't too sure what kind of changes would occur when he used the darkness attribute divine text in battle, as well as the various innate mystiques. But all in all, the speed at which he broke through the bottleneck of the Ball of 9 Underworlds was more than twice as fast as before. This was the biggest change that he could see, and it was also a very important change for him at the moment. However, even though the breakthrough speed had increased, Long Yu knew that it would still take a very long time for him to truly break through the bottleneck of the Ball of 9 Underworlds. He couldn't waste this time. He could at least try to comprehend the 9 Underworlds and try to increase the density of his power again. Long Yu was basically certain that he was absolutely safe within the Divine Hall. Not to mention that the Divine Hall was extremely well hidden. Even if Long Yu came personally, he would not be able to find the Divine Hall without receiving any prior information. Not to mention the demigods of other alien races. The alien races that could invade the territory of the Silk Race were basically existences that only had a power density of 20 times or so. It was basically impossible for them to surpass Long Yu's in terms of perception. Therefore, at least for the time being, Long Yu didn't need to worry that he and the girls would be discovered by other alien races in the shrine. As time flowed by, Long Yu's comprehension of the Netherworld 9 absolutes gradually increased. If it was in the outside world, it would take him almost a year to advance from the second round of the 9 Underworlds to the next level. However, in the clear in the temple, he had no concept of time. My compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text has increased, and my speed of cultivating the 9 Underworlds has also increased. Now, cultivating the second round is slightly more difficult than cultivating the first round. Long Yu felt rather regretful. If he had directly increased his compatibility with the darkness attribute earlier, wouldn't his power density be several times higher now? However, there was no point in regretting. Fortunately, Long Yu had obtained the opportunity to break through the bottleneck of the sphere of 9 Underworlds in the temple, and then increased his compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text along the way. it could be considered a coincidence. Long Yu's cultivation of the heavenly Nether 9 absolutes increased with each level. During this process, he still couldn't sense the Saint Emperor's consciousness. The pitch-black space he was in blocked off all of his senses, preventing him from communicating with the outside world. Even the communication of consciousness was blocked by the endless darkness. The second round of the 9 underworlds is complete. By the time Long Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief, his power density had already risen to a level of 28 times. Moreover, he had completed the second round of cultivation of the Netherworld 9 absolutes. Long Yu didn't know how much time had passed in the outside world. However, according to his cultivation speed, if he wanted to complete the second round of the Netherworld 9 absolutes under the condition of level 13 compatibility, he would need around 2 years. Even if there's a certain boost in this temple, at least a year should have passed, right? Otherwise, it would be impossible for me to cultivate to this level, Long Yu thought to himself. Afterwards, he chose to increase his compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text, going from level 13 to level 14. As for his compatibility with other elemental divine runes, it had been weakened from level 9 to level 8. In summary, Long Yu's overall strength had definitely increased. This was because the vast majority of the power he comprehended and used belonged to the category of shadow elemental divine runes. The most important of the divine text that he did not use much was the spatial divine text. This could be replaced by the void nether dragon blade, and it would not affect Long Yu too much. After reaching level 14 with the darkness attribute divine text, Long Yu felt like his body was covered in a layer of pitch-black shadow. It gave off a chilling aura of death. The various connate mystic fruits in the miniature world had all been upgraded. After increasing their compatibility with the darkness attribute divine text, their power had all transformed. The current Long Yu, even if he used shadow attribute divine runes to display some ordinary techniques, the power would still be extremely astonishing. Raising my compatibility level with the darkness attribute divine runes to level 13 and 14 will double the strength of any darkness attribute divine rune I cast. Just the increase in compatibility level with the darkness attribute divine runes will almost double my strength. Long Yu sensed his current strength and found that although his strength density was only 28 times, he could release the power of 30 times the strength density. That made him think of something. The secret method of Sky Palace 9 exterminations had 9 levels in every round, but it was not until now that Long Yu realized that it had been planned. For a demigod, every 10 times the strength density was a transformation. If the Sky Palace 9 exterminations was like that, the transformation of strength did not correspond to the number of rounds of training. However, if it was combined with the improvement of the darkness attribute divine text, it would be completely reasonable. If Long Yu had chosen to increase the darkness attribute divine text at 19 times the strength density, then he would have the power of 20 times the strength density. Now that he had 28 times the strength density, and he had chosen to increase the darkness attribute divine text to level 14, the basic power of his techniques would be equivalent to 30 times the strength density. This made Long Yu clearly feel the strength of the Sky Palace 9 exterminations. When he was fighting an enemy, his enemy could only see the density of his power, but they would never know that his compatibility with the class of Shadow had reached level 14. Right now, even if he were to fight some alien demigods whose power density was more than 40 times, he might not necessarily lose to them. As I expected, I felt that the number of rounds and levels of the Sky Palace 9 exterminations was not right. Now it seems that it was completely planned. Long Yu was greatly enlightened. If this continued, when he reached 90 times the strength density, he would be able to exert the power of 100 times the strength density. However, by then, his compatibility with the other divine texts would drop to level 0. Unless Long Yu increased his compatibility with the other divine runes by 2 levels during this process, he wouldn't be able to clear it to 0. After reaching level 12 in compatibility with the darkness attribute, every increase in level was equivalent to allowing Long Yu to exert the power of double the strength density. However, this was only the basic effect. There were other effects, as the compatibility with the darkness attribute increased, but Long Yu was not clear about them yet. When he raised his darkness attribute divine text to level 14, the speed of the ball of 9 exterminations transformation became faster and faster. Long Yu could feel that he was about to break through that bottleneck very soon. In the shrine, he did not have much concept of time, but he knew that it would not be long before he completed 2 rounds of the Sky Palace 9 exterminations. Very soon, his ball of 9 exterminations broke through the bottleneck that had existed for a long time. After absorbing the mysterious power in the Shrine of Shadows, an invisible barrier finally broke. Now, as long as I kill the other foreign races, I can devour their corpses and let the ball of 9 exterminations grow. Long Yu thought in his heart. He knew that the current him felt as though he had obtained a new life. In the clear cloud shrine, he had undergone a complete transformation. However, he was more worried about the other women. He did not know if they had obtained what they wanted in this shrine. Fortunately, the space in which the clear cloud shrine was located was extremely well hidden. There was a concealment formation that the Silk race had set up around the shrine to prevent it from being discovered by other foreign races. Therefore, even if the women left the shrine first, they should not encounter any danger. The driving force is finally gone. The pitch-black fog in front of Long Yu gradually dissipated. However, he had also lost the ability to move forward. At this time, the communication between him and the Holy Emperor finally recovered. Chapter 1680. Long Yu finally broke away from the mysterious, pitch-black power and finally resumed communication with the Holy Emperor. He discovered that the Holy Emperor and the other women had already left the Clear Cloud Temple. However, they did not leave the area where the temple was located. Instead, they were waiting for him in this hidden space. Before Long Yu came out, none of them wanted to leave. It must be noted that Long Yu was the irreplaceable core of the group. However, all the women had gained a lot in the Clear Cloud Temple this time. What surprised Long Yu was that Yi Ziwei had gained the most out of all the girls. This was because there was no suitable hall for her among the 6 halls of the Clear Cloud Divine Hall, so she directly used the driving force to head deeper into the Divine Hall. The power at the beginning allowed her to move forward continuously. In the end, she deified 2 innate techniques and obtained a mid-level modified quasi-divine source item. She gained 3 things in total. However, she also experienced a test from the Clear Cloud Temple. Long Yu's mind was connected to the Holy Emperors, so he did not need to ask. He already knew what Yi Ziwei had said before. The test in the Clear Cloud Temple was different from the test that Long Yu had experienced in the Rain God Temple. What Long Yu experienced in the Rain God Temple seemed to be the personal experience of the Rain God Temple's creator, while the test that Yi Ziwei experienced in the Clear Cloud Temple was a simple battle test. She did not transform into other creatures or objects. It was just a simple battle. If she won, she could continue to move forward. The target of the battle was a demigod of the Silk race, which had 20 times the power density. It was a very difficult challenge for Yi Ziwei before, but she still won in the end. After all, the demigod of the Silk race was only an illusion and not a real body. It would definitely show some flaws in certain aspects during the battle. As long as he showed the slightest flaw, Yi Ziwei would be able to seize it, and she would have a chance to win. Also, before Yi Ziwei entered the Temple of Clear Clouds, she had also controlled Icarius, the demigod of the Silk race, with the technique of lightning control. When released in battle, it could also play a decisive role. What made Long Yu the happiest was the peach. Ji Tao's remnant soul had been occupying the Juyo Dragon Emperor's body all this time, but she was unable to unleash the original power of the Juyo Dragon Emperor. Not only was the density of her power slowly recovering, but she had also lost her innate skills. Her battle prowess was less than 1/100th of what it used to be. But now, the Qingyan Temple had given Ji Tao a chance. Because Ji Tao had followed Long Yu into the Shadow Temple, she had given birth to her own innate, remarkable power fruit in the Shadow Temple. This surprised Long Yu, but at the same time, he was also happy for Ji Tao. In this way, Ji Tao's combat strength would be greatly improved. Most importantly, Ji Tao would see hope for the future. Otherwise, even if she occupied the body of the Juyo Dragon Emperor, she would not be able to compete with the other demigods. Although she didn't say it, she was actually very lonely in her heart. But now, the situation was different. In the Qingyun Temple, a brand new small world had been born in Ji Tao's body, and it was temporarily supported by the two innate remarkable power fruits. If she went to other shadow-type temples in the future, she might be able to further improve. This brought hope to Ji Tao. The gains of the other women came from the improvement of the secret cultivation methods. In their respective temples, they had all comprehended the secret cultivation methods to a deeper level. Moreover, the Holy Emperor had continued to improve and had divinized one of his own skills. And the effect of the improvement of the secret cultivation methods was that the strength density of the women had increased significantly during this period of time. The strength density of Long Yu had increased from 20 times to 28 times, and the strength density of the women had also increased from 13 to 14 times to 20 times. Among them, Ji Tao was even more impressive. Her strength density had reached 40 times. In addition, the two innate remarkable power fruits were born in her small world. Compared to before, her combat strength was simply worlds apart. This made Long Yu more confident about going deeper into the Wild Sandstar Zone. According to my estimation, we should have spent 1 to 2 years in the Qingyun Temple. I didn't expect that 3.5 years had passed. When he received this news from the consciousness of the Holy Emperor, Long Yu was a little surprised. But time was not particularly important to them now. Anyway, there was no place for them to guard. As for the territory of the human clan and the demon clan, there would not be any problems for the time being. After the battle in the eroding Moon Ancient region, the overall strength of the human clan and the demon clan had improved a lot. Also, they had occupied the territory of the Soul clan and formed an alliance with the Wine clan. Without the threat of the Sword clan and the Six-Winged clan, it was impossible for them to encounter too much danger. Therefore, Long Yu and the others had enough time to improve themselves. With the strength density of 28 times, together with the star branding mark and the octagon bloodline, it is even possible for me to fight against the alien demigods whose strength density is 50 times. But I still don't know how the battle will be. After all, the overall strength of the alien demigods whose strength density is 50 times is definitely not weak. Thinking to himself, Long Yu felt that the driving force in his body had disappeared. Therefore, he did not stay in the Qingyun Temple for too long and directly left the temple. This divine hall only opens once every 120 years, and the same cultivator cannot enter the same divine hall a second time. In the future, let's bid farewell to this divine hall. After Long Yu came out, he prepared to rest and reorganize with the girls before setting off again. Now that everyone's strength had increased, if they were to stay at the edge of the Wild Sandstar Zone, they would undoubtedly be able to sweep across this star zone. But for the current them, this star zone was not worth thinking about. First, in terms of cultivation resources, there were not many cultivation resources at the edge of the Wild Sandstar Zone that they could use. For example, in terms of creations, there would only be a few first-grade heavenly crystal creations here at most, which were not very useful to Long Yu and the others. Second, in terms of temples, there were too few temples in the nearby star zone. According to the information that Long Yu had received, the next temple nearby would open in 2 years. With their current strength, there was no need to wait for such a long time. They might as well go deeper into the Wild Sandstar Zone and find more opportunities. Anyway, with their current strength, they would not feel too much pressure even if they were to face some medium-level alien races. If they were still in the Langia Star Zone, although Long Yu and the others could not afford to offend the Sword race, the Six-Winged race, and the Mechanical race, the 3 strongest races, they could already challenge any other races except the 3 races. Even if the strongest of some races had a strength density of 60 times, they might not be able to kill Long Yu completely. Next, let's set a goal. Now that we have enough strength, it's time to plunder some cultivation resources, such as the ultimate creations. Such treasures should exist in some medium-level alien races. As long as we get one, we will have one more demigod. Right now, Long Yu was thinking about the original people in the Void Galaxy. He wanted all of them to step into the demigod realm. That way, their overall strength would be stronger. After all, if there were only a few demigods, it would be bad if they encountered an emergency. If there were more demigods, it would not be a problem. They could either look for the ultimate creations for people to absorb and step into the demigod realm, or they could look for the hidden miracle of a single person like the Saint Emperor and let the members of the Void Galaxy, who were at the 7th phase Great Dominator, step into it and see if they could become demigods. There should be many miracles like the eroding moon ancient region in this star zone, but they were not as large as the ones in the eroding moon ancient region. Therefore, from now on, Long Yu and the others would focus on pulling other people into the demigod realm. Of course, this was very difficult. Even for medium-level alien races, it was not easy to have one more demigod. For Long Yu, plundering some cultivation resources to become a demigod was a big test. The trip to the Clear Cloud Temple had caused earth-shaking changes to Long Yu and the others. Among them, Long Yu's ball of 9 serenities had finally broken through the bottleneck. This move would be even more terrifying in the future. Outside of the Clear Cloud Temple, the outside world had also undergone earth-shaking changes in the past 3.5 years. The Silk Race that had originally occupied this part of the universe had been annihilated. The few remaining Silk Race beings had become the vassals of other alien races. Just as Long Yu had expected, the galaxies around the Clear Cloud Temple were all occupied by the Serpent Feather Race. This alien race was not strong, but because Long Yu had captured all the demigods of the Silk Race, they had taken advantage of the situation and developed. However, this would not allow the Serpent Feather Race to rise. Whether or not a race could rise depended entirely on the strongest demigod in it. Although the Serpent Feather Race had occupied the former territory of the Silk Race, the cultivation resources there were not enough to make the strongest demigod of the Serpent Feather Race stronger. Let's go. We'll replenish our cultivation resources here, and then we'll be on our way to the depths of the Wild Sand Space Zone. After saying that to the girls, Long Yu took them and flew out of the hidden space where the Clear Cloud Temple was located. Although there were no high-level items in this area, it was not a bad idea to take some heavenly crystal-level items. Right now, the people in the Void Galaxy in Long Yu's small world also needed tremendous cultivation resources to improve. Right now, Long Yu could not just focus on himself. The other people in the Void Galaxy were also very important. Now that he was strong enough, he could take the cultivation resources that the cultivators below the demigod level needed at will. Chapter 1681. 3 months later, Long Yu and the others were already on their way to the depths of the Wild Sand Galaxy. With the ancient rain bridge, they would soon reach their destination. Over the past 3 months, Long Yu and Ji Tao had worked together to plunder vast amounts of cultivation resources from the Clear Cloud God Hall. Although they hadn't killed many outsiders, the cultivation resources were enough for everyone in the Void Galaxy to cultivate. Long Yu had transformed into a demigod of the Silk Race, and Ji Tao was in the physical form of the Jiuyo Dragon Emperor. The other side had no idea that humans and demons were fighting. Therefore, Long Yu could move around freely and plunder all kinds of cultivation resources. Long Yu had plundered over 100 level 1 heavenly crystal level creations in total. For cultivators below the demigod level, it was already an extremely rare training resource. Shui Luo, Boss Xiong, and Su Yuqing were the most excited. They finally saw the hope of rising. It was indeed beneficial to follow Long Yu. In the 3.5 years when Long Yu was still in the Clear Cloud Temple, the people in the Void could be said to be in a state of free cultivation. Many people in the Sovereign Secret Realm had risen from ordinary Sovereign Realm to Grand Sovereign Realm. With sufficient cultivation resources, it was only a matter of time before their cultivation base rose. Long Yu did some calculations. There were almost 1 million cultivators in the Void Galaxy in his small world. Some of them were followers of the Bone race, some were from the branch clans of the White Feather race, and the rest were unaffiliated cultivators from various places. There were also a few armies of sovereigns. Among the 1 million living beings, there were 80,000 sovereign realm existences. That was a terrifying number. In other words, just the great sovereign realm army alone could be formed in the Void Galaxy. It was equivalent to the original combination of the human race and the demon race. It should be known that a great sovereign realm cultivator could not be cultivated casually. It was relatively difficult. However, with Long Yu's help, it wouldn't be too much of a problem for him to cultivate to the great ruler level. In the meantime, Long Yu killed quite a few ignorant alien demigods, such as those of the Serpent Feather clan. Those alien demigods were all swallowed by Long Yu's ball of Tartareth. Over the past 3 months, the ball of Tartareth had finally made some progress. The effect of slowing down time by 10 times had been improved to 11 times. This allowed Long Yu to see hope. If he continued to improve it, how many times could the ball of 9 underworlds slow down the flow of time? Long Yu didn't know yet, but he was looking forward to it. At the same time, he found that the military order of Tartareth in the Dragonbone Tower had also come to fruition. The 10 silk demigods he had captured earlier had been completely refined into dark creatures and could be used at any time. These 10 silk demigods had at least 15 times the energy density. Their combat power would definitely not be weak when they worked together. After the ancient rain bridge was built, Long Yu stepped onto it and walked toward the top of the bridge. Soon, he crossed the distance of 10 domains and walked toward the depths of the Wild Sand Galaxy. After about 10 leaps in a row, he found that he had finally come to a galaxy where the power was even denser. According to the intensity of the power in this galaxy, it should be able to give birth to alien demigods whose power density was 40 to 50 times higher than in the Langus Space Zone. This is it. Let's take a look first. Long Yu did not know what kind of foreign race this starry sky belonged to. After sensing that there was no danger outside, he directly came down from the immemorial bridge of rain. Thereafter, he activated the God Incarnation Shadow, I Sacred ability. His Umbra I Divine ability allowed him to observe the situation within a radius of 100 billion miles. It was the best method to investigate the situation. At this time, Long Yu soon discovered that the race living in this space was also the race that he had met before, the Icefire race. It was a relatively strong race in the deathmatch in the Eclipse Moon Ancient domain. When they were competing for the central treasure, Long Yu saw one of them who had just become demigods. In the Wild Sandstar region, the Icefire tribe was much more powerful than the Silk tribe and the Serpent Feather tribe. In terms of overall strength, the Icefire tribe was comparable to 10 Silk tribe or Serpent Feather tribe. Because of this, they were able to occupy such a large territory near the center of the Wild Sandstar region. Long Yu didn't know how large the territory of the Icefire family was, but he had decided to make the Icefire family his next target. I don't want to act in disguise like before. It's too troublesome and will waste our training time. Do you have any way to let us know the movements of the demigods in the Icefire family? Long Yu asked the girls. At a time like this, his power was a bit limited. Before, when he wanted to find out information, he had to act in disguise and sneak into the enemy's territory. However, it was a waste of time, and it would take Long Yu a lot of time and effort to make arrangements. So, if there were other ways, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Let me do it. Red Oriole stood out and smiled. I have a technique that became divinized in the Clear Cloud Temple. It can condense some seeds of blood spirit. Those seeds of blood spirit can attach to other creatures without any warning and listen to their movements. If the seeds of blood spirit are placed on some of the weaker demigods of the Icefire family, we will be able to learn some information about the Icefire family, including information about the temple or miracles. That's not bad. Hearing this, Concubine Yu's eyes immediately lit up. In that case, we could just wait for them to reveal the relevant information. There's no need to take the initiative to inquire about it and waste time. Right now, everyone's time is very precious. We should use it to cultivate. Okay, then I'll leave it to you. How can we attach the seeds of blood spirit to them? Long Yu also nodded his head and asked Red Oriole. The seeds of blood spirit are invisible. If we want to attach them, we only need to approach them. I can't do that myself. I need Long Yu's help. Red Oriole pondered and said, No problem. Then the rest of you can train yourselves here. I'll plant the seeds of blood spirit with Red Oriole and find a few weak demigods of the ice-fire family. While talking, Long Yu drew the primordial bridge of rain again. Then, he stepped on the bridge alone with Red Oriole. With Long Yu's camouflage skills, it was not difficult to approach the demigods of the ice-fire family without alarming them. Then, he would ask Red Oriole to attach the seeds of blood spirit to them. Everything would be fine. There should be around 80 demigods of the ice-fire family in total, at least half of them, or 20 to 30, were the weaker ones. As long as their cultivation was not higher than Red Oriole's, it was impossible for them to discover the seeds of blood spirit. If they encountered other powerful demigods, Red Oriole could put the seeds of blood spirit into the hibernation state. In that case, nobody would be able to discover it. However, the information that the seeds of blood spirit could receive was limited when they were in the hibernation state. However, compared with being discovered, it was better to hibernate when it was time to hibernate. It didn't take long for Long Yu and Red Oriole to finish attaching the seeds of blood spirit to the 20 demigods of the ice-fire family. Then, they returned to the area where they first came to this space through the primordial bridge of rain and hid themselves. The area they were in was an extremely concealed space, and it was also extremely remote. Normally, there wouldn't be any blind existences that would come here. In any case, Long Yu was constantly observing his surroundings with his umber eyes. Once something happened, he would be able to discover it immediately. Let's cultivate in peace until the seed of blood spirit receives any news about the temples or miracles. There should be many temples in the vast territory of the Ice and Fire clan, and they should open more frequently. Hopefully, we can get more opportunities to enter the temples. That way, our strength will increase even faster. Long Yu said to everyone. Then, he activated the technique of the Ball of Tartarus, covering himself in the area where the time flow of the Ball of Tartarus was slowed down. At this moment, Long Yu finally discovered a problem, which made him very happy. The area where the time flow of the Ball of Tartarus was slowed down forcibly. Except for Long Yu himself, everyone else would be slowed down in the area. However, after the Ball of Tartarus broke through the bottleneck in the Temple of Clear Clouds, the situation had changed. Now, Long Yu could freely choose which living beings were affected by the slowed flow of time. In other words, Long Yu could choose who was slowed down and who was not. To put it simply, apart from Long Yu himself, Consort Yu, the Holy Emperor, Red Oriole, and the other girls also had the possibility to train quickly in the area where the time flow was slowed down. In this way, all of us can train at a speed 11 times faster than in the outside world. The speed of our improvement will be beyond the imagination of all living beings. Long Yu was very excited about this because he had always been the one taking the lead. At certain critical moments, he couldn't get any help even if he wanted to, because the others couldn't keep up with his pace. But now, he didn't need to worry about this problem, because he could let others train at the same speed as him. However, after trying out, he discovered that only those in the demigod realm could be selected by him and not be affected by the time flow. If other people in the galaxy came to the area affected by Long Yu's Ball of Tartarus, they would still fall into a state where the time flow was slowed down and they wouldn't be able to train as fast as Long Yu. Even so, this was already very good. At the very least, the cultivation speed of Consort Yu and the other girls would increase, and they would be able to keep up with Long Yu's pace. In that case, let's work hard on our training. Long Yu directly entered a state of cultivation, and the secret cultivation method of the 9 exterminations of Tartarus began to operate. Chapter 1682. In the void, Long Yu and the others began to cultivate in the area where the flow of time was slowed down. The seed of blood spirit that Red Oriole had planted in the demigods of the Ice-Fire clan also began to work, allowing them to constantly receive news from the Ice-Fire clan. Most of the news was filtered out by them. Only news about shrines or miracles could pique everyone's interest. Of course, news about supreme quality creations would also catch everyone's attention. However, supreme quality creations were extremely rare even in the territory of the Icefire clan. There would basically not be such news in a short period of time. In the area where the flow of time was slowed down, everyone kept cultivating and making rapid progress. 3 months passed in the outside world. Within the zone where the flow of time was slowed down, everyone had been cultivating for a total of 33 months. In other words, it was close to 3 years. During this period of time, everyone's cultivation progress was obvious. If it weren't for the news from the seed of Blood Spirit that a miracle was about to open, Long Yu and the others would have continued cultivating. However, since a miracle was about to open, they couldn't miss it. After coming out of the area where the flow of time was slowed down, Long Yu looked around and sized up the girls. He had a rough idea of their cultivation progress. First of all, Long Yu himself. In just 3 months, he had already cultivated the 9 exterminations of Celestial Nether to the 3rd round and comprehended the 6th level. After reaching level 14 incompatibility with the shadow element, his cultivation speed was almost 100 times faster than when he was at level 12. In other words, after reaching level 12 incompatibility with the shadow element, every increase in compatibility would increase the cultivation speed of the secret technique by 10 times. Originally, the difficulty of cultivating the 9 exterminations of Celestial Nether had increased exponentially according to this degree. Every round of cultivation was at least 10 times more difficult than before. However, with the super compatibility with the shadow element, his cultivation speed didn't slow down much. After 33 months of cultivation, Long Yu's power density had reached 34 times, and the 9 exterminations of Celestial Nether had reached the 6th level of the 3rd round. In other words, he could improve the cultivation of the 9 exterminations of Celestial Nether by 1 level in less than half a year. That was a terrifying speed. If there was a comparison, it was very clear when compared with the Saint Emperor and Consort Yu. Originally, when they arrived at the territory of the Ice and Fire race, the Saint Emperor and Concubine Yu's energy density was around 20 times. But now, after cultivating their own secret techniques, they had basically only increased the energy density by 2 times. This was because they had already reached the 2nd round of the secret cultivation method they had comprehended. At this moment, their cultivation speed was a few times slower than the 1st round, which made it extremely difficult for them to increase the density of their power. If they hadn't cultivated in the area where the flow of time was slowed down, they wouldn't have even been able to increase their power density by 1 time in the past 3 months. It was not hard to imagine how difficult it was for regular demigods to cultivate. Therefore, when the girls saw that Long Yu's power density had increased by so much, they were all astonished. They knew very well how difficult it was for them to cultivate their secret techniques. Now that Long Yu was so much ahead of them, he could still maintain such a terrifying cultivation speed. Could it be that Long Yu's talent was really so much higher than theirs? In fact, the talent gap between them wasn't very big, but Long Yu's progress was so smooth because he was completely compatible with the shadow element and received the legacy from the 9 Hell Tablet. However, compared with the special effect of the 9 exterminations of Celestial Nether, which forcibly increased the compatibility of the shadow element by 1 level, the special effect of the other girl's secret techniques was also very good. For example, the special effect of the Saint Emperor's secret technique was to continuously produce a defensive barrier around his monster core during battle to protect it, so that it wouldn't be destroyed by the opponent. At this moment, Long Yu had already found some time to teach the cultivation method of the Devil Dust Heart to the women. This was to prevent them from suffering serious injuries and being unable to recover from them. Protecting their demonic cores was another way to protect them. In other words, although the Saint Emperor's combat ability was not as strong as Long Yu's, it wouldn't be easy for Long Yu to kill the Saint Emperor. Their defense and recovery abilities had become far superior to regular demigods. Long Yu thought for a moment. It was probably similar to the sword demigod that he had seen before, whose power density was close to 40 times. In order to break the Saint Emperor's defense, special methods had to be used, such as the special ability born from the fusion of the Dragonbone Thousand Feathers, which had a corrosive effect on the defense barrier. What surprised Long Yu was that among the girls, Yi Ziwei had actually developed a special effect of a secret technique. That was, when she cultivated for a year, her cultivation speed would double. As long as the cultivation was not interrupted or disturbed, this cultivation speed acceleration effect would continue. Over the past 33 months, Yi Ziwei's cultivation speed had already reached nearly 3 times the basic speed. Just the cultivation speed of 3 times was already terrifying, because Yi Ziwei's power density had already reached 25 times, far surpassing the other girls. If the other girls wanted to reach her level, they would have to cultivate for at least 3 more years. Needless to say, if Yi Ziwei continued to cultivate, her cultivation speed would increase by multiple times, allowing her to possess a higher density of power even faster. Yi Ziwei, you stay here. You don't have to participate in the opening of the Divine Sight this time. Demigods can't enter the Divine Sight anyway. We only need to send some of the 7th phase dominators of the Void Galaxy into the Divine Sight. After speaking to Yi Ziwei, Long Yu said to Ji Tao and the Saint Emperor, Moon Song, Saint Emperor, you two stay here and cultivate with Yi Ziwei. If anything happens, you can take care of each other. Of course, this place is very remote, so basically no accidents will happen. Senior Consort Yu, Ji Tao, and Red Oriole, the 3 of you will follow me to the vicinity of the Divine Sight, where we receive the news this time. We will send the people of the Void Galaxy there, and hope that they can successfully step into the demigod realm in the Divine Sight. The girls had no objection to Long Yu's arrangement. If they were to act separately, the Saint Emperor and Long Yu would definitely have to separate. In this way, the 2 of them could communicate with each other so that they could know each other's situation at any time, and they wouldn't have to worry about each other during the operation. Ji Tao, on the other hand, would definitely follow Long Yu. Now that Ji Tao's power density had been restored to 45 times, in terms of combat ability, she was basically no weaker than the demigods of the alien races with a power density of 40 times. On this trip to the Divine Sight, the news that Long Yu had received was that the Icefire clan had selected more than 300 experts of the peak of the 7th phase Dominator level to step into the Divine Sight and try to break into the demigod realm in the Divine Sight. And among the demigods of the Icefire clan who were escorting these 300 experts, the strongest were 2 existences with a power density of more than 40 times. Also, if a fight broke out, the news might get out, and by then, the strongest demigod of the Icefire clan might be attracted. By then, there would be more than 50 times the demigods of the Icefire clan, and Long Yu would definitely not be able to defeat them all by himself. Therefore, Ji Tao was a powerful combat force in Long Yu's plan, and she had to follow him. This operation, we will most likely be exposed, so we must first create a void field and kill all the people of the Icefire clan in the void field. This way, our identities will not be exposed. Long Yu said to the Saint Emperor, therefore, I will first find out the vicinity of the Divine Sight, and when the time comes to build an immemorial rain bridge, I will need you to cooperate with me, Saint Emperor, to build a strong enough void field. And when the void field is completed, you can come back here through the immemorial rain bridge. In addition, because he needed Yi Ziwei to always be in a state of cultivation, Long Yu couldn't leave for too long, or else he wouldn't be able to maintain the area where the flow of time was slowed down for her. Long Yu planned to leave behind a demon dust clone. That way, he would be able to maintain the slowed time flow for 3 days. 3 days later, Long Yu would have to return and continue to maintain the time flow deceleration zone. Otherwise, it would have a considerable impact on Yi Ziwei's cultivation. In any case, Long Yu is currently hoping that the combat power of the others would be able to catch up to him. That way, the pressure he would have to face would be much less. Yi Ziwei's secret special effect gave Long Yu a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she would be the one who rose the fastest after Long Yu and Ji Tao. Next, I will inform everyone in the Void Galaxy that there are only 325 people allowed to enter the miracle site. We will pick 325 people. If we are all on the same side, we will be able to help each other even if we encounter danger. After pondering for a moment, Long Yu said, "However, this divine site is different from the eroding moon ancient region. Its level is far lower. Although there are a lot of good things in it, it won't be easy to step into the demigod level in the divine site. Of the 325 people, I'm afraid that at most 5 will become demigods." This was one of the 3 divine sites in the territory of the Ice and Fire families. The eroding moon ancient domain only opened once every 20 years, while the temple only opened once every 100 years. The opening time of this miracle was neither too long nor too short. It opened every 80 years. For the Ice-Fire race, it was a very important ceremony. Through the opening of this miracle, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race could basically increase steadily. Therefore, the Ice and Fire families must have attached great importance to the opening of this divine site. The demigods that were escorted were 2 existences with a power density that was 50 times that of ordinary people. There was no telling how many powerful existences were watching in secret. The strongest demigod of the Ice and Fire families must have been paying attention to the opening of this divine site. But for Long Yu, it didn't stop him from making up his mind to send everyone in the Void Galaxy into the divine site. The divine site was not divided by race. Therefore, all humans and demons could enter this temple without any obstacles, as Long Yu could kill the demigods of the Ice and Fire families. Then, let's start the operation. Long Yu's lips curled. After he came to the Wild Sand Space Zone, he was about to start another big operation after destroying the Silk Race. Chapter 1683. The miracle that was about to open was called the Sun Ting Ancient Realm. It was a place similar to the Eclipse Moon Ancient Realm, except that it was smaller in scale and could only allow 325 people to enter at the same time. This time, Long Yu planned to occupy all the spots, not giving the Ice and Fire clan any chance. In this way, there would definitely be a conflict with the Ice and Fire clan, but Long Yu didn't care. Anyway, as long as he handled it properly, he wouldn't be afraid of any existence of the Ice and Fire clan. Even the strongest demigod of the Ice and Fire clan, he had already investigated clearly. It was just a power density of 56 times. An alien demigod of such a level couldn't suppress Long Yu if he fought against Long Yu. Long Yu could still kill him. After the battle in the Clear Cloud Temple, Long Yu hadn't had a good fight yet. In Long Yu's heart, he was more eager to fight, because if he won, it would be a greater improvement for him. The effect of the Sphere of Tartarus would be improved again, and his training speed would be faster than before. He selected 325 people from the void in his small world and prepared to let them enter the Sun Ting Ancient Realm. As for the others, he would leave them for now. There should be many such opportunities in the future anyway. Let's go. Taking Consort Yu, Ji Tao, and Red Oriole with him, Long Yu built a primordial bridge of rain, stepped on it, and disappeared in the remote and hidden void. The next moment, Long Yu arrived near the Sun Ting Ancient Realm that he had found out earlier. There are 3 days left before the opening of the Sun Ting Ancient Realm. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race are all preparing. I can report their movements at any time. Red Oriole said to Long Yu, the seed of blood spirit that she planted in the demigods of the Ice-Fire race had been working so far. That was how she got the news about the Sun Ting Ancient Realm. Okay, if they come close to where we are, remind me immediately. Now, let's get ready and try to catch them all in one go. Long Yu nodded his head before activating his divinized sacred art, Shadow Eye. Behind him, the phantom of a giant pupil appeared. Then, it absorbed everything within a radius of 100 billion miles, condensing it into a miniature, allowing Long Yu to see everything. The Sun Ting Ancient Region is 10 billion kilometers away from us. The Ice-Fire race has a total of 7 demigods and 325 experts of the 7th phase Great Dominator Ice-Fire race. They are already waiting at the entrance of the Sun Ting ancient region. Long Yu's observation of the situation made him start to plan. Everything was under his control. The message from Red Oriole, on the other hand, told Long Yu that while the other demigods of the Ice-Fire race were paying attention to what was going on in the Sun Ting ancient domain, none of them expected that somebody would cause trouble here. Therefore, they were all busy with their own business and were even far away from the Sun Ting ancient domain. If they wanted to rush over, Long Yu estimated that it would take at least a few days, even if they used the space-time teleportation formation. Moreover, if they were to fight here, the other party would definitely not come over alone. They would definitely wait for the other demigods to arrive before they dared to attack Long Yu. This bought enough time for Long Yu. The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race was also relatively far away from the Sun Ting ancient region. It was impossible for them to rush over immediately. Of course, they might be able to come through the space-time tunnel, but Long Yu would set up the absolute space domain outside the Sun Ting ancient region. Even if it was the space-time tunnel, it could not directly appear in front of Long Yu and the others. Everything is ready. Let's do it. When there was only one day left before the opening of the Sun Ting ancient region, Long Yu finally decided to take action. Ancient Rain Bridge, set up. Long Yu's figure directly appeared near the Sun Ting ancient region, where the group of Ice-Fire race stayed. Then, he raised his hand and let Consort Yu, Ji Tao, and Red Oriole out of the small world. Kill. Without any hesitation, Long Yu directly let the 3 women attack. At the same time, he directly set up another ancient rain bridge, accurately connecting it to where the Holy Emperor and the others were. Then, the Holy Emperor stepped onto the bridge and appeared in front of Long Yu and the others. The Dragonbone 1000 feather battle weapon fused together and activated an even stronger absolute space domain, covering the entire area within 1,000,000 kilometers. The appearance of Long Yu greatly shocked the group of demigods of the Ice-Fire race. But when they came back to their senses and wanted to call for help, they discovered that all information had been blocked. Within the absolute space domain, no information could be transmitted out unless the consciousness of Long Yu and the Holy Emperor was connected. This caused the demigods of the Ice-Fire race and the group of 7th phase great rulers to panic. But soon, they discovered that what appeared in front of them was actually a group of brats. Only the black dragon-like fellow had a power density of 45 times, while the others only had a power density of 20 to 30 times. This made them feel relieved. After all, there were 2 demigods in their escort team with a power density of 50 times. This gave them confidence in themselves. Originally, they thought that those who dared to attack them must be extremely powerful. But now it seemed that these people had taken the wrong medicine. Of course, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race would not underestimate Long Yu and the others because of this. Instead, they directly launched an attack in their strongest manner. Of the 2 strongest demigods of the Ice-Fire race, one of them had a power density of 48 times, and it directly swept toward the body of the dragon of the netherworld occupied by Ji Tao. The body of the Ice-Fire race was half light white ice, and the other half fiery red flames, like 2 colored butterflies. The other demigod of the Ice-Fire race charged toward Long Yu. After all, on the surface, Long Yu only had a power density of 34 times, and he was definitely not as strong as Ji Tao. However, the Ice-Fire race was wrong. On the other hand, there were 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race charging toward Consort Yu, Red Oriole, and the Holy Emperor respectively. However, most of the 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race only had a power density of 20 times, so Long Yu was not worried about the 3 women's safety. It seems that I'll be the breakthrough. Long Yu clearly realized that, because the other women were actually not that strong. They were only on par with the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, and the body that Ji Tao turned into as the dragon of the netherworld couldn't possibly be a match for the demigods of the Ice-Fire race who had a power density of 48 times. Of course, it was not a problem for Ji Tao to hold on for a while, but she would definitely be killed if the battle went on. Therefore, The battle on Long Yu's side was of paramount importance. For Long Yu, the ice-fire race with a power density of 43 times was still the strongest opponent that he had ever met. However, it was not enough to scare him, because he had experienced two improvements after the last battle. The first was in the Temple of Clear Clouds, and the second was during his training a while ago. The two improvements were enough for him to deal with alien demigods with a power density of 50 times. Infinite Grasp. Go! When the demigod of the ice-fire race was still attacking Long Yu raised his hand and performed the infinite level martial skill, using the hell-shocking divine rune. At the same time, the melodious sound of a guqin spread out, and with the effect of the star branding rune, it fell heavily on the body of the ice-fire race. Long Yu didn't aim at the power core of the opponent because the ice-fire race had two power cores, and they could change their positions freely in the body. It was impossible for Long Yu to destroy the power core of the opponent directly, so he could only perform a random method to enhance the effect of the two ancient god runes on the opponent. This time, the power density of the ice-fire race was directly reduced to 33 times, even one level lower than that of Long Yu. Die! The Dark Flame Ghost and the Death Prison of the Four Symbols were unleashed at the same time. Pitch-black flames constantly invaded and corroded the opponent's spirit, while the power of death unleashed by the Death Prison of the Four Symbols corroded the opponent's physical body, constantly devouring the life force within it. The demigod of the ice-fire race, with a power density of 43 times, was absolutely unable to resist Long Yu right now. It couldn't even put up any decent resistance. When the power density was about the same, the effect of the guqin rune could be fully carried out, dragging the opponent into some painful illusions and making them forget the situation they were in. In the next moment, the damage of the Dark Flame Ghost and the Four Symbols killing prison devastated the body and soul of the demigod of the ice-fire race at the same time. The double pain allowed the demigod of the ice-fire race to break out of the illusions. The power inside its body burst out, and the power of the hell-shocking runes of ice and fire melted together, breaking the void and exploding where Long Yu was. Long Yu had long since prepared for his opponent to launch a fierce counterattack when he was heavily injured. Therefore, when his opponent's attack exploded beside him, he had already reacted. The 1,000 dragon bone feathers fused with the battle weapon turned into 1,000 dragon bone feathers, condensing into 1,000 feather screen beside Long Yu. It was the screen of 1,000 feathers, a defense method that the dragon skeleton 1,000 feathers, the first level of the awakening of the fusion weapon, could resist most attacks when the enemy's power density was about the same. The ice and fire outsiders' attacks were incredibly powerful. Eternal rank ice and fire divine characters, two diametrically opposed powers, collided with each other and exploded. The resulting power far surpassed what eternal rank divine characters could produce. A single explosion had completely shattered the 1,000 feather barrier. However, at this moment, Long Yu raised his hand and took out the beginner source item, the Divine Mirror Stone. He constructed a city of mirrors around the demigod of the ice-fire race and blew it up with the power of the hell-shocking runes. The terrifying explosion, combined with the damage of the Dark Flame Ghost and the Four Symbols killing prison, heavily wounded the demigod of the ice-fire race. He could barely summon the power inside his body for a moment. Chapter 1684. The god of the ice-fire race, who had a 43-fold power density, didn't expect that a human boy with a 34-fold power density could have such terrifying power. It had been more than 200 years since it became a demigod, but it had never seen such a guy who could weaken the density of other people's power and defeat the opponent with a power density 10 times higher. It had never even heard of such a guy before. If it was said that such a genius appeared in the Oracle clan or the Nature clan, it would still feel that it was possible. However, the kid in front of him was from a weak race that didn't belong to this star field. The status of the God Emissary clan and the Nature clan in the Wild Sandstar area was similar to that of the Sword clan, the Six-Wing clan, and the Machine Clan in the Lang Star area. They were the two strongest clans. Moreover, they were always fighting against each other. That was why they didn't have time to invade the territories of other clans. Otherwise, the entire Wild Sand Starfield would have been occupied by these two races. The God Envoy clan and the Nature clan were both the strongest clans in the Wild Sand Star region. There was an extremely intense competition between them, and conflicts constantly broke out between them. Their relationship was even more tense than the relationship between the Sword clan, the Six-Wing clan, and the Machine clan. The three great clans of the Lang Star area still maintained peace on the surface. Of course, if one clan wanted to expand, the other two clans would join hands to restrain it. That was how they could maintain the peace of the entire Lang Star area. On the other hand, the Oracle clan and the Nature clan had already invested all of their strength in fighting against each other, so they did not have the strength to expand outwards. The demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was 43 times higher, was completely suppressed by Long Yu at this moment and could not resist at all. If the situation went on like this, it would probably be completely killed in 3 seconds. This situation was beyond the expectation of all the members of the Ice-Fire clan. The demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose power density was 48 times, tried to return to defend as fast as possible, but Ji Tao was not to be trifled with. She stalled the demigod with all her might. Under such circumstances, Long Yu's opponent could not be saved. In the next moment, the demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose power density was 43 times higher, was about to be completely killed. It was also at this moment that the demigod of the Ice-Fire race realized the danger and finally made a decision: self-detonation. In the past, the opponents that Long Yu had encountered were basically because they had scruples about having their own people around, so they had never been able to self-destruct and were completely killed by Long Yu. However, the demigod of the Ice-Fire race realized one thing, which was that those people must have been well prepared since they attacked them. Even if he didn't blow himself up, the other members of the Ice-Fire race would have nowhere to run. Since that was the case, why didn't he just self-destruct and drag these fellows down with him? However, Long Yu had already seen through its thoughts. When it was just about to explode itself, Long Yu had already performed the technique of 9 Serenity's ball. The pitch-black ball released countless intertwining beams of light, entangling the demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was 43 times that of Long Yu's, making its self-destruction 11 times slower than Long Yu's. In the meantime, the speed at which Long Yu killed the demigod of the Ice-Fire race did not slow down at all. After 3 breaths, the demigod of the Ice-Fire race had already lost consciousness before he self-detonated. His spirit, soul, and body had all suffered a destructive blow before he was swallowed by the dark sphere. An alien demigod with a power density 43 times higher is truly a great tonic. Long Yu couldn't help but sigh. After swallowing the demigod of the Ice and Fire race, he found that the sphere of Tartarus had improved a lot. Although it hadn't reached the level where time could be slowed down by 12 times, it had improved a lot. By rough estimation, as long as all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race were swallowed, Long Yu's ball of Tartarek will be able to reach a higher level and slow down time by 12 times. Not only could it speed up Long Yu's training, but could also significantly weaken his opponents in a battle. For Long Yu, the significance was obvious. I have to finish this as soon as possible. Thinking to himself, Long Yu observed Ji Tao, only to discover that she was struggling to stall the demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose power density was 48 times higher. He immediately knew what was going on. Ji Tao, hold on for a while longer. I'll go help the others first. Long Yu sent a telepathic thought to Ji Tao. Then, he rushed to where Consort Yu, the Holy Emperor, and Red Oriole were. At this moment, the 3 girls were standing back to back and performing defensive methods to resist the joint attacks of the other 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race. The situation was not good. Under such circumstances, Long Yu chose to take care of these small fries first. As for the 325 7th phase dominators of the Ice-Fire race, they were practically non-existent to Long Yu. They could not threaten them at all. As long as the demigods were taken care of, there was no way these guys could escape. Therefore, Long Yu did not bother to pay attention to them. Void traversal. He teleported to the side of the three girls through void traversal. Then, he directly activated the dark flame ghost. The iron chain that was burning with pitch-black flames instantly expanded and completely enveloped the 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race. Under the void traversal domain, these demigods of the Ice-Fire race knew that it was difficult for them to escape, so they fought with their lives. They did not expect that Long Yu would kill the strongest among them so easily. Now, it was simply impossible for them to escape. They could only watch helplessly as the dark flame ghost swept toward them. The aura of death contained within made them tremble with fear, but none of them begged Long Yu for mercy, because this was a battle between races. Begging for mercy was of no use at all. Self-detonation was their only choice. However, just like the Ice-Fire race with 43 times the strength density, they had just thought of self-detonation when the sphere of 9 serenities slowed down the flow of time. At this moment, the Holy Emperor, Red Aureole, and consort, you were all unaffected by the slowing down of the flow of time. The 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density had been reduced by 10 times, could not hold on for long under the attacks of the Holy Emperor, Red Aureole, and consort you. Now that Long Yu had reached this point, he directly turned around to deal with the most troublesome guy in the enemy's camp. The Ice-Fire race with 48 times the strength density. I have to kill it instantly. The longer it drags on, the worse it will be for us. Long Yu was aware of this point, so he immediately rushed towards the direction of Jitao. At this moment, the physical body of the Dragon of Abyss was fighting the Ice-Fire race at a close distance. With the rapid recovery ability of the Devil Dust Heart, the demigod of the Ice-Fire race was unable to completely kill Jitao despite the absolute suppression. He could not even free himself from her obstruction. At this moment, Long Yu arrived. Surrender, or you'll be dead for sure. If you die, you will have nothing left. Long Yu asked Little Void to send a telepathic thought to the Ice-Fire race, but his mind was not on that. Seeing that the Ice-Fire race was about to respond angrily, Long Yu simply raised his hand. Sphere of 9 serenities. The Divine Eyes technique was finally performed by Long Yu again. The shadow of an enormous black sphere appeared behind him and dragged the soul of the demigod of the Ice-Fire race into the gap of the turbulence of time. In the next 3 seconds, Long Yu would be free to do whatever he wanted. I have to take the opportunity to kill this guy. Long Yu had made up his mind. He knew that he could not save anything now, or it would be easy for the enemy to counterattack. While the enemy was distracted, the Divine Eyes technique of the Sphere of 9 Serenities restrained the enemy. Then, the dark flame ghost appeared in Long Yu's hand. A small cluster of flames leisurely invaded the enemy's body and burned all the way to the enemy's power core. Dark Flame's mistake. This method of the Dark Flame Ghost was one of the more powerful attacks that Long Yu had at the moment, and it was perfect for dealing with the power core of the Ice-Fire race. In less than 2 seconds, the 2 power cores in the enemy's body were completely destroyed, and the enemy lost the ability to fight. Sphere of 9 Serenities, Devour. Relieved, Long Yu directly let the Sphere of 9 Serenities start the devouring process. On the other hand, the 5 weakened demigods of the Ice-Fire race were also suppressed by Yu Fei and the other 2 girls. Under the effect of the Sphere of Tartaretha's slowing of the flow of time, they were no match for the 3 girls at all. Very soon, they were all killed. Then, the Sphere of 9 Serenities continued to devour them. A moment later, Long Yu's Sphere of 9 Serenities finally devoured all 7 Ice-Fire race demigods and improved to a certain extent. The effect of the Sphere of 9 Serenities had officially stepped into 12 times. I wonder when the next bottleneck of the Sphere of 9 Serenities will be. Or rather, where will the upper limit of its continuous improvement be? Long Yu wasn't sure about this, but the current Sphere of 9 Serenities shouldn't have reached its upper limit yet. After all, it had just broken through the bottleneck not long ago. Intuitively speaking, The next bottleneck of the Sphere of Nine Serenities might be when the Sphere of Nine Serenities reached 20 times. But he wasn't sure about the specifics, so he could only talk about it as he improved it. Kill those ice-fire race demigods. Long Yu said to the three girls. Then, he began to send out the 325 people that had been arranged in the small world. These people were the elites of the Void Galaxy, and all of them were at the 7th stage Great Dominator realm. Basically, their strength was no less than that of Long Yu, who had stepped into the Eclipse Moon Ancient Domain when he was at the 5th stage Great Dominator realm. These people could be said to be carefully selected. Even if they went to the Eclipse Moon Ancient Domain, they could still become new demigods. When we enter the Sun Ting Ancient Domain this time, while everyone pays attention to safety, try to improve yourself as much as possible. I hope that when we come out, there will be 5 more demigods among you. After Long Yu finished speaking to everyone, he discovered that the 325 7th stage Great Dominators of the Ice-Fire race had all been killed by the 3 girls. Red Oriole, how are the other demigods of the Ice-Fire race? Long Yu asked Red Oriole. Right now, he had to pay attention to the movements of the entire Ice-Fire race. This operation was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. Chapter 1685. Red Oriole replied very soon. The demigods of the Ice-Fire clan and other places had already sensed the change. They were gathering their people and heading toward the Sun Ting ancient realm. They were probably going to build a space-time tunnel to get here. However, there was not much movement for the time being. Red Oriole could not know the specific situation because most of the Ice-Fire race had gathered together. If she activated the seed of blood spirit that she had planted in the Ice-Fire race's demigods, she would be discovered, so she could only sleep for now. Although she had completely fallen out with the Ice-Fire clan, Red Oriole might keep those seeds of blood spirit for other purposes. At this moment, she only needed to know that the Ice-Fire clan was gathering demigods and would attack soon. Okay, everyone, go to the edge of the Void territory and observe where the space-time tunnel will appear. Tell me as soon as it appears. Saint Emperor, you can go back first. If something happens here, I will build another ancient rain bridge for you to come over. After Long Yu finished speaking to the ladies, he turned around and faced the 325 Void Galaxy experts that he had selected. Long Yu glanced at the crowd. Among the people he selected were Shui Luo, Boss Bear, Su Yuqing, like Qing Feng, like Tian Lei, and other commanders of the Dominator Army. There were also Qi Hua, Mei Man Xian, and other friends that Long Yu had known when he was still on the Heavenly Mandate continent. There were also women such as Finyu Xian, Shu Chan, Shi Yangwu, and Lu Yuan. There were also Gu Yixian, Gu Wenshan, Nanmin Yingxia, Xiao Xing, and other friends that Long Yu had made outside of the Heavenly Mandate Island. Mo Zhaiqian, Hui Yuanbai, Sahans Han, Xingwu, and Duguijian were also selected. There were also White Cloud, Bu Bu, and Lu Guanming from the Jintian clan. Qin Yashuang and Zi Su were naturally included. As for the Heaven Fire Doyen that Long Yu had promised, he couldn't miss it either. This lineup was quite impressive. Now, it all depended on which of them could reach the demigod level first. The eroding Moon Ancient Domain could be said to be extremely dangerous, but the Sun Ting Ancient Domain was much less dangerous because only the geniuses of a single race could enter it. However, there were still some dangers that required everyone to judge for themselves. Even Long Yu couldn't help them overcome these dangers. They could only rely on their own strength and agility. Everybody get ready. The Sun Ting Ancient Territory is about to open. Be careful when you enter it. Even if the opportunity to become a demigod is right in front of you, do not act recklessly. Your life is the most important thing. Do you understand? Long Yu solemnly said to everyone, because we will have many opportunities like this in the future. There is no need to risk our lives. We all have time. Understood. Everyone answered in unison. Everybody was rather excited about the opportunity to become a demigod, especially the experienced ones such as the Heaven Fire Elder, Su Yuqing, Boss Xiong, and the others. It was the same for heavenly thunder of the white feather demons. They had been great dominators for too long, but they were still far away from becoming demigods. Now that they finally had the chance to become a demigod, how could they not be excited? You have fulfilled the promise you made to me back then, the Heaven Fire Elder said to Long Yu solemnly. Although he had once believed in Long Yu and believed that Long Yu would give him the opportunity to become a demigod, he didn't expect that the day would really come. Of course, this was just an opportunity. Whether or not he could become a demigod depended on his own performance in the future. Don't say any more. Get ready. Long Yu smiled and waved his hand at everyone. He glanced at the Sun Ting ancient territory not far away. It was a densely packed ancient city with a metallic style. However, there was a translucent barrier outside that prevented them from entering. When it was opened later, the translucent barrier would disappear. Red Oriole had received some information about the dangers and opportunities in this metallic ancient city earlier through the seed of Blood Spirit. Red Oriole, tell them in detail what they need to pay attention to. I'll observe the surroundings first. Something might happen at any time now. After Long Yu finished speaking to Red Oriole, he started to activate his divinized Umbra, divine ability, and surveyed his surroundings. Red Oriole flew over and explained the information about the Sun Ting ancient territory to everyone again. She told them in detail what kind of opportunities and dangers might appear so that they could be prepared in advance. However, the Sun Ting ancient territory was the same as the Eclipse Moon ancient territory. Some things would be different every time they entered. Therefore, the key still depended on their own judgment. Red Oriole's information could only be used as a reference. Long Yu's shadow, eye, and the giant pupil appeared behind him. He observed the situation within a radius of 100 billion kilometers. Finally, the moment before the Sun Ting ancient territory was about to open, he discovered something. Just 1,000,000 kilometers away from the void territory, for space-time corridors had appeared at the same time. The exits of the 4 space-time corridors should lead from different directions in the Ice-Fire Race's territory. Powerful demigods from the Ice-Fire Race were about to gather here. Although it was already too late to stop Long Yu and the others from sending people into the Sun Ting ancient territory, they would not allow the aliens who had killed the Ice-Fire Race to leave this place alive. They're here. Consort Yu and Ji Tao noticed the sign at the same time. Although their detection range was not as vast as Long Yu's shadow eye, they could still sense something 1,000,000 kilometers away. Don't act recklessly. Just wait for them to attack. Long Yu was calm and did not panic at all. You go into my small world first. We can't let them know that we are human beings for now. At this moment, the Ice-Fire Race only knew that the Ice-Fire Race in the Sun Ting ancient territory had been killed, but they didn't know who did it. That was why they were so cautious and only came after gathering enough demigods. After Consort Yu and Ji Tao entered Long Yu's small world, Long Yu disguised himself as a demigod of the Silk Race and wandered freely in the void territory. No one could see what was going on outside the space-time corridors through the space-time corridors. Therefore, before demigods appeared from the 4 space-time corridors, they would not be able to see what was going on here. At this moment, the Sun Ting ancient territory finally opened. Long Yu let the 325 people in the void enter the Sun Ting ancient territory directly and then disappeared from the void. Even the strongest demigod would not be able to see them. Therefore, the identities of Long Yu and the others could not be exposed before the battle officially started. And now, the condition that Long Yu wanted to create was to put them in a state where they could not send any information out once the battle started. In this way, their identities would not be exposed, and they would not be in danger from other aspects. In that case, I will take the initiative to attack. Now that they have all entered the Sun Ting ancient territory, there is no need for me to guard this place. After all, no one can step into the Sun Ting ancient territory and pose any threat to them. Thinking this, Long Yu raised his hand and removed the void territory. Then, he picked a space-time corridor and was ready to attack. The 4 space-time corridors appeared in the 4 directions of the Sun Ting ancient territory. Previously, Red Oriole had received the information that the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race was on the right side. But now, Long Yu was not sure that the space-time corridor that appeared on the right side came from the right side of the Ice-Fire race's territory. In a situation where I'm not sure, I can only probe first. Thinking this, Long Yu turned into the demigod of the Silk race and directly walked toward one of the space-time corridors. Then, he released a void territory at the exit of the space-time corridor. Then, he went to the exits of the other 3 space-time corridors and covered them with a void territory. In this way, if the Ice-Fire race wanted to come out of the space-time corridor, they would have to face Long Yu's void territory first, which would buy him some time. Then, he randomly picked a space-time corridor and directly stepped into it. Then, he turned into the pure power of the divine characters of space. At this time, in the space-time corridor, Long Yu discovered a wonderful thing. He seemed to have become one with the space-time corridor. This, the deified technique of the Book of Shadows, allows me to turn into the power of the divine characters of space. Now, it seems that the effect is manifested here. It allows me to control the entire space-time corridor and even close the space-time corridor. After the Book of Shadows was deified, Long Yu had never entered the space-time corridor. Now that he had entered, he immediately discovered this phenomenon, which made him delighted. In this way, didn't it mean that he was invincible? First of all, if he turned into the divine characters of space and entered the space-time corridor, the opponents would not know that he had already entered. Also, he could use the power of the space-time corridor to attack the enemies. The enemies would not even know who the opponent was and where the opponent was. How could they fight him? Very good, for demigods of the Ice-Fire race, but all of them have a power density of more than 30 times. It seems that they're not very confident. They are actually stopped at the entrance of the space-time corridor. Thinking this, Long Yu directly controlled the entire space-time corridor with his mind, making the power of the 5 elements around the space-time corridor sweep toward the 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race at the entrance of the space-time corridor. Before that, of course, he had to first block their way of retreat. Kill them. The storm condensed by the power of the 5 elements swept toward the 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, immediately enshrouding them. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose power density was more than 30 times, could travel freely outside the edge of the space-time corridor. The regular storm of the 5 elements couldn't do anything to them at all. But now, what Long Yu was controlling was the power of the 5 elements in the entire space-time corridor. Chapter 1686. The 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was more than 30 times, were enveloped by the storm that Long Yu condensed with the power of the 5 elements. They were all rather confused and had no idea why the 5 elements would suddenly come at them. However, they were rather strong. They each activated their defensive moves, and the enormous phantoms of all kinds of deified techniques appeared behind them. Defensive barriers appeared non-stop, blocking the Genesis storm of the 5 elements around. After all, the 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was more than 30 times, joined hands. Long Yu really couldn't do anything to them for a while. However, Long Yu was not in a hurry, because the Genesis storm of the 5 elements under his control was infinite. As time went by, more and more of the power of the 5 elements was gathered from the edge of the space-time pathway and congregated into a furious storm that enshrouded the 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race and savaged the entire space-time pathway. Such a situation was something that the demigods of the Ice-Fire race had never seen before. In his current state, Long Yu found that he was almost invincible. As long as he continued, even the strongest demigod would not be able to resist the Genesis storm of the 5 elements. However, there was one thing. If the demigods of alien races were strong enough, they should be able to break the storm and choose to leave the space-time pathway. In that case, it would be impossible for Long Yu to chase after them with the Genesis storm of the 5 elements. Of course, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was more than 30 times, were completely enshrouded by the Genesis storm of the five elements and completely under Long Yu's control. It was impossible for them to leave because the divine symbols of space in the space-time pathway were basically useless. They had to resort to methods similar to Long Yu's Path of Nine Nether in order to get away from the Genesis storm of the five elements. But the four demigods of the Ice-Fire race clearly did not have such methods. That's good. I don't have to kill them one by one. I can just use the primordial five elemental storm to kill them off. Long Yu thought to himself. He gathered the power of the five elements from all directions even faster and gathered it into a storm in the space-time pathway, attacking the four demigods of the Ice-Fire race. About an hour later, the storm of the five elements had swept across the entire space-time pathway. The four demigods of the Ice-Fire race could not resist it anymore. Their bodies began to crack in the storm of the five elements, and they collapsed one after another. The sphere of 9 underworlds appeared after the other party was completely killed and devoured their corpses. Of course, Long Yu kept the wreckage of the small world. After all, there were many cultivation resources in it for the people in the Void Galaxy. Also, it was possible to find resources that even Long Yu needed. The debris of the demigod small world was worth preserving. There are still 3 other space-time pathways. After taking care of the demigods of the Ice-Fire race in this space-time pathway, Long Yu shifted his attention to the other 3 space-time pathways. Before he left, he turned into the power of the spatial runes again and disintegrated the entire space-time pathway. This was an ability that Long Yu had obtained after becoming the embodiment of the power of spatial divine runes. He could directly disintegrate a space-time tunnel, making it so that it would disappear in less than 3 days. Of course, the premise was that there were no other living beings in the space-time tunnel. Otherwise, Long Yu would not be able to disintegrate it. That was because what he could disintegrate was the pure power of space. However, when there were other creatures in the space-time pathway, it would not be pure anymore. Therefore, Long Yu could not disintegrate all the creatures at the same time. A space-time pathway disappeared under Long Yu's will just like that. Long Yu, on the other hand, turned into the spatial runes again and returned to the area where the Sun Ting ancient realm was. He found that the situation in the area had changed slightly because the demigods of the Ice-Fire race had all come. Although he stopped the demigods of the Ice-Fire race in one of the space-time pathways, the other demigods of the Ice-Fire race in the other 3 space-time pathways had enough time to pass through the space-time pathways and come to the Sun Ting ancient realm. It was a pity that Shi Hua, Man Xian, and the rest of the people who should have entered the Sun Ting ancient realm had already entered. There was no one left for Long Yu nearby. The exploration of the Sun Ting ancient realm would not end without a month or 2. Now that Long Yu had turned into the divine symbols of space, his opponent couldn't find him at all. Not to mention ordinary alien races. Even the demigods of alien races with a high density of power couldn't find out that the divine symbols of space were the incarnation of a living being. Therefore, Long Yu had the patience to waste time with them. A total of 11 demigods of the Ice-Fire race had come to this area. The void domain had been shattered, but it didn't matter. Long Yu did not believe that the 11 demigods of the Ice-Fire race would stay here forever. Among the 11 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, 2 of them have a density of more than 50 times, and 1 has a density of more than 60 times. They should be the strongest 3 of the Ice-Fire race. I'm afraid that I'm no match for the demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a density of more than 60 times, not to mention that I'm with the other 2 with a density of more than 50 times. Long Yu knew that he had to think of a solution. Very soon, he came up with an idea. The gathering of the powerful demigods of the Ice-Fire race meant that the other areas of the Ice-Fire race's territory were empty. Without any hesitation, Long Yu turned around and walked away. He stealthily entered another space-time tunnel and exited it. He chose to go to other areas of the Ice-Fire race's territory and stir up some trouble to divide the opponent's combat power. To Long Yu, this was a very easy thing to do. In addition, he could now disintegrate the entire space-time tunnel, causing his mobility to be much higher than the other outsiders. Moreover, After he separated his opponents, he would need at least a period of time before he could reunite. After all, he could directly disassemble the space-time tunnel. A chain of plans took shape in Long Yu's head. Near the Sun Ting ancient domain, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race had approached the space-time tunnel that Long Yu disintegrated. They were probably studying why the space-time tunnel suddenly collapsed and disappeared, but they certainly could not find any signs of Long Yu's appearance. After leaving through another space-time tunnel, Long Yu found himself in an extremely prosperous area. This galaxy should be one of the most prosperous galaxies in the Ice-Fire race's territory. Every training planet in it was equivalent to a core training planet in the Demon race's territory. And on the core training planet in this galaxy, there were traces of several demigods of the Ice-Fire race. This is the center of the Ice-Fire race's territory, the Ice-Fire galaxy, in which there are 3 sources of divine runes of the Ice attribute and 3 sources of divine runes of the Fire attribute. It's the birthplace of the entire Ice-Fire race. With the Ice-Fire galaxy as the center, the Ice-Fire race has been developing and expanding, which is why the territory of the Ice-Fire race is today. Through Red Oriole's seed of Blood Spirit, Long Yu had a general understanding of the Ice-Fire race. So, he knew that the Ice-Fire galaxy before his eyes was of utmost importance in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. If he were to attack a training planet in this galaxy, the counterforce that he would suffer wouldn't be small. The defense arrays alone would be enough to keep Long Yu busy. However, only by attacking this galaxy could he make the demigods of the Ice-Fire race as nervous as possible and divide the enemy. This is where the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, with 60 times the power density, usually stays. But that guy is not here right now. Only 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race with 40 times the power density are left. The other 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race who used to live in this galaxy have either been killed by me in the Sun Ting ancient domain or still there. In that case, I might as well do it. Long Yu pretended to be a member of the Ice-Fire race. Then, he landed on a training planet and activated the techniques of the Hunters of Tartarian. The Hunters of Tartarian in the demigod level were sent out just like that. After they killed any creature, they could turn into a new Hunter of Tartarian. Of course, even the initial Hunters of Tartarian could not compare to the real demigods. But the problem was that, as long as the demigods did not come, the cultivators of the Ice-Fire race of other levels were absolutely no match for the Hunters of Tartarian. As the Hunters of Tartarian spread out on the entire training planet, it became a nightmare for the Ice-Fire race. However, at this moment, some of the defense arrays were activated. Powerful ice or fire symbols burst out from the surface of the planet and annihilated all the Hunters of Tartarian that appeared. After all, the Ice-Fire galaxy was the center of the Ice-Fire clan. Every training planet was equipped with some prehistoric defense rune arrays, just like certain planets in the Blood Demon galaxy had defense rune arrays. Those defense arrays could not stop Long Yu's invasion, but they could eliminate part of the Hunters of Tartarian and stop them from expanding. The reaction of the members of the Ice-Fire race on the training planet, on the other hand, confused Long Yu. The cultivators of the Ice-Fire race did not react quickly, but seemed rather lazy and slow. Or rather, they had lived a comfortable life for too long and did not realize that alien races could invade even in the Ice-Fire galaxy. In this kind of situation, Long Yu's 9 Netherworld Hunter was able to continuously succeed, continuously killing the foreign races of the Ice and Fire race, and then condensing them into new 9 Netherworld Hunters. The 2nd and 3rd generation Hunters of Tartarian became weaker and weaker, but their numbers were growing too fast. Every dead member of the Ice-Fire race would become a Hunter of Tartarian. As a result, the black creatures spread out on the entire training planet like a swarm of locusts. Very soon, they were densely packed and moving in large groups. Although the primeval defense arrays could stop the advancement of the Hunters of Tartarian to some extent and kill them one after another, Long Yu did not care about the Hunters of Tartarian at all. He simply urged them to self-detonate at the center of the defense arrays. Just like that, the entire training planet began to fall. Chapter 1687. The cultivation planet of the Ice Fire race that Long Yu landed on was directly occupied by the hunters of Tartarian. Although it was protected by the ancient defense arrays, the whole cultivation planet was still like hell. It was the nightmare of the Ice Fire race. Long Yu didn't wait for long. For hours after he landed on the cultivation planet, when the whole planet was about to fall, a demigod of the Ice Fire race finally showed up. It was a demigod of the Ice Fire race whose power density was more than 20 times. The demigod came from nearby and began to clean up the hunters of Tartarian on the cultivation planet. Faced with the alien demigods, the hunters of Tartarian that Long Yu summoned could not resist at all. But the problem was that there were too many of them. Even the demigod of the Ice Fire race could barely clean up all the hunters of Tartarian at once. They could only clean them up one by one. On the cultivation planet, many places were still resisting with the ancient defense arrays. The hunters of Tartarian could not break in for now and were destroyed one after another. But overall, the number of hunters of Tartarian was still increasing. In some areas, it had even become an ocean of hunters of Tartarian. The demigod of the Ice Fire race that came was still trying to save the cultivation planet. Unfortunately, before it was familiar with the way of the hunters of Tartarian, Long Yu had teleported over and completely enshrouded the demigod of the Ice Fire race. It was not hard to imagine what would happen to the demigod of the Ice Fire race when it encountered a demigod when it could not send a message out. In no more than 3 breaths, Long Yu had killed the demigod of the Ice Fire race and swallowed it with the sphere of Tartareth. Then, he disappeared into space again, completely disappearing. No other creatures discovered his trace. The news that a demigod of the Ice Fire race who came to rescue the cultivation planet that was attacked was killed without a sound was soon spread out. However, none of the creatures knew who killed the demigod of the Ice Fire race. Long Yu did not stay on this cultivation planet. Instead, he immediately moved to another cultivation planet and used the same method as the Netherworld hunters to spread to the other 2 cultivation planets. Very soon, the 2 cultivation planets were also enveloped in the despair of the Netherworld hunters. The demigods of the Ice Fire race must have learned the news, but the situation in the Sun Ting ancient domain was rather special. After all, it was the first time that the Ice Fire race had been invaded in the history of the Sun Ting ancient domain. In the past, the oracles had traded some training resources for half of the qualifications to enter the Sun Ting ancient domain. The invasion this time, on the other hand, had never happened before. Up until now, the Ice Fire race had lost too many demigod experts, which was enough to make the Ice Fire race suffer heavy losses. Long Yu's first wave of action alone put the Ice Fire race in a critical moment of crisis. All the demigods of the Ice Fire race were mobilized. At such a time, the fact that a cultivation planet was attacked in the core area of the Ice Fire race's territory immediately triggered the nerves of the demigods of the Ice Fire race. Also, the place where Long Yu attacked happened to be near a space-time tunnel that led to the Sun Ting ancient domain. So the demigods of the Ice Fire race immediately thought of something. Had the guy who killed all the demigods of the Ice Fire race in the Sun Ting ancient domain gone to the core area of the Ice Fire race? Wasn't his target the Sun Ting ancient domain? In the beginning, these demigods of the Ice Fire clan thought that Long Yu's goal was to invade the Sun Ting ancient domain and occupy it. After all, the timing of his attack was exactly the time when the Sun Ting ancient domain was opened. Also, after Long Yu left, they tried to enter the Sun Ting ancient domain and found that the slots to enter the Sun Ting ancient domain had indeed been occupied, and they were sure that none of the 325 slots belonged to the descendants of the Ice Fire clan. That confused them. Was it not enough for the guy to invade the Sun Ting ancient domain and attack the cultivation planets in their core area? The strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race, whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Ice Fire race, led two demigods of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 30 times that of the ice-fire race's core area through the space-time tunnel angrily. At this moment, Long Yu was already waiting in the space-time tunnel. He attacked the cultivation planets in the core area of the ice-fire race's territory because he wanted to draw out the powerful demigods of the ice-fire race and make them act on their own so that Long Yu could kill them one by one. If the enemies were all gathered outside of the Sun Ting ancient domain, it would be impossible for Long Yu to fight them head-on. Now that the three demigods of the ice-fire race had come to the space-time tunnel, they were like turtles in a jar and Long Yu's prey. Without any hesitation, Long Yu calmly turned himself into the divine symbols of space and hid in the space-time pathway. Then, when the enemies came in, the storm of the five elements was completely raised and enshrouded the three demigods of the ice-fire race. The enemies had a demigod of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements. Therefore, they could endure the Genesis storm of the five elements for a long time. However, during that time, Long Yu controlled the entire space-time tunnel, preventing anyone from coming in or leaving. Under such circumstances, the enemies could only be killed no matter how tough they were. Long Yu couldn't kill the demigods of the alien races whose strength density was more than 60 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements, because their strength would undergo a qualitative change after 60 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements. However, during that time, Long Yu had controlled the entire space-time tunnel, preventing anyone from coming in or leaving. Under such circumstances, the enemies could only be killed no matter how tough they were. However, with the strength density of more than 50 times, Long Yu wasn't scared at all. He could kill the enemies in such a way with enough time, without any risk. The Genesis storm of the five elements couldn't destroy them no matter how strong it was. As the storm of the Genesis storm of the five elements blew, the three demigods of the ice-fire race immediately realized why one of the space-time tunnels directly disappeared. Had a powerful alien race that could control the space-time tunnels appeared? While resisting the Genesis storm of the five elements, they tried to send a message out, only to discover that it was impossible to send any message out of the space-time tunnel. Also, the Genesis storm of the five elements was getting more and more intense for them. At first, it was easy for them to resist it, but soon, the two demigods of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 30 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements couldn't take it anymore. The demigod of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements was fine for now, but as the situation went on, it wouldn't be long before they couldn't take it anymore. They felt that they were only one step away from the Genesis storm of the five elements, when their strength density was 60 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements. It was a pity that, right now, Long Yu's strength density had reached 34 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements, and he had reached the 6th level of the 3rd round of the 9 hells of heavenly serenity. Together with the methods that could control the space-time tunnels, it was basically not a problem for him to deal with the alien demigods whose strength density was more than 50 times. Even in the outside world, in a one-on-one fight, Long Yu wouldn't be scared of an alien demigod whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Genesis storm. He had all kinds of methods that could make up for the difference of 20 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements. The star branding mark and the octopole bloodline alone could make up for the difference of 18 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements. It was needless to say that his other methods were much more powerful than those of other demigods. They were all rarely seen methods, such as the Dark Flame Ghost, which was an advanced modified item that only the strongest species had. 2 hours later, the two demigods of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 30 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements couldn't take it anymore. 2 hours later, the last demigod of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements was torn apart. Then, Long Yu secretly activated the abyssal ball, swallowed the enemy's body, and collected the remains of the enemy's small world. It was not until 6 hours later that the last demigod of the ice-fire race, whose strength density was more than 50 times that of the Genesis storm of the five elements, was torn apart. Then, Long Yu secretly activated the abyssal ball, swallowed the enemy's body, and collected the remains of the enemy's small world. It's done. Continue according to the plan, and the entire ice-fire race will fall into my control. Thinking to himself, Long Yu didn't destroy the space-time pathway like before. Instead, he quietly stopped the power of the Genesis storm of the five elements and restored the bottleneck of the entire space-time pathway. Then, he returned to the central area of the ice-fire race's territory and attacked some training planets. The way he toyed with the demigods of the ice-fire race convinced Long Yu that it wouldn't be difficult to deal with the entire ice-fire race. The Ice-Fire clan could be considered a mid-level clan. If they were in Lang Star area, they could easily crush the human clan and the monster clan. They could even enslave all creatures of the human clan and the monster clan. But now, in Long Yu's eyes, they were just so, mainly because his own strength was too terrifying. Just by relying on the divine ability of the Book of Shadows to transform into spatial divine characters and control the space-time tunnel, he would be able to destroy most of the ice-fire race. Needless to say, he still had other tricks up his sleeve. Even if he encountered a setback here, he still had to hide his identity. The primordial bridge of rain had been built, and he could leave any time he wanted. However, right now, Long Yu wanted to protect the Sun Ting ancient realm and take them away after the people in the Void Galaxy came out. But now that I think about it, there seems to be another option. Floating in the void, Long Yu watched the two training planets not far away being ravaged by the hunters of the Tartars. He had a new plan. The Ice-Fire race had a lot of resources for training. Maybe he could control the entire Ice-Fire race. Of course, the premise was that he had to kill the Ice-Fire race whose strength density was 60 times that of the Genesis storm. In that case, Long Yu could disguise himself as the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race and easily loot the wealth and resources of the entire Ice-Fire race. He could even take the divine temples and miracles for himself. Chapter 1688. Long Yu's idea wasn't impossible to achieve. However, the difficulty of achieving his goal wasn't small. The most important thing was to kill all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race who had absolute power. In that case, Long Yu would be able to pretend to be the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race and rule the entire Ice-Fire race. I've killed a demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of more than 50 times, a demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of 60 times, and two demigods of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of more than 50 times. According to the information from Red Oriole's Seed of Blood Spirit, Long Yu knew that there were only 4 demigods of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of more than 50 times. Only 3 of them came to the Sun Ting ancient domain this time. The other demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of 50 times did not show up in front of Long Yu. In order to achieve the goal of controlling the entire Ice-Fire race, he could not let go of any of the 4 experts. Otherwise, some of his strange requests would be questioned, and he would not be able to achieve the goal of completely controlling the Ice-Fire race. This is the first one. Next is the second one. Long Yu continued destroying the training planets in the core area of the Ice-Fire race's territory, tried to attract the experts of the Ice-Fire race near the Sun Ting ancient domain. However, it did not work this time, because he had killed a demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of more than 50 times, which had raised the alarm and attention of the other demigods of the Ice-Fire race. They knew that the Ice-Fire race was faced with a great crisis. If the crisis was not handled well, the entire Ice-Fire race could be destroyed. The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race must have deduced that something was targeting the entire Ice-Fire race. There were 2 reasons for such an assumption. Firstly, the demigod of the Ice-Fire race with a power density of more than 50 times was killed without any ability to resist, and the enemy was able to disintegrate the entire space-time pathway. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying the enemy was. Secondly, Judging from the enemy's successive actions, the enemy was very hostile to the Ice-Fire race, and it was not just targeting the Sun-Ting ancient domain. Based on this speculation, the Ice-Fire clan's next move would not be random, but the continuation of the entire Ice-Fire clan as the goal. Under such circumstances, even giving up a few cultivation planets in the core region of the Ice-Fire race would be harmless. Now, the Ice-Fire clan didn't want to see more demigods being sacrificed, so all their demigods were gathered together. Long Yu had vaguely learned of this information from the Blood Spirit Seed. However, the few Blood Spirit Seeds that had transmitted the information had been destroyed after a short while. It was clear that the other party already knew of the existence of the Blood Spirit Seed. If you want to concentrate your power, this is a good idea. Long Yu sighed. Even he did not have the courage to fight the demigods of the Ice-Fire race head-on, because it was impossible. However strong Long Yu was, he was only a demigod whose strength density was 30 times. Even if it was possible for him to fight an opponent whose strength density was 60 times, it was impossible when other demigods interfered. If Long Yu fought head-on, it wouldn't be long before he was killed. However, he had other ways. His biggest advantage was that the enemy did not know his identity yet, and he had the primordial bridge of rain. The grudges between races had existed since ancient times, so Long Yu did not need to worry that the Ice-Fire race would ask for help from other races when they couldn't bear the losses. That would expose that the Ice-Fire race was not in a good state right now. Not only would it be impossible for them to ask for help, but it was also more likely that they would be attacked by other alien races. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race would not do such a brainless thing. Therefore, this was a battle between Long Yu and the Ice-Fire race. Long Yu began to travel in the entire territory of the Ice-Fire race with the primordial bridge of rain, fanning the flames here and there. In only a few days, the hunters of Tartarian had almost spread in the entire territory of the Ice-Fire race. The appearance of those hunters of Tartarian exhausted the demigods of the Ice-Fire race. When they moved together, even though they could create a space-time tunnel and arrive at any time, because they could only clear the hunters of Tartarian on one training planet at a time, their speed of clearing the hunters of Tartarian was not as fast as what Long Yu could create. Over the past few days, dozens of space-time tunnels had appeared in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. They were all the space-time tunnels that the demigods of the Ice-Fire race used together. Although they failed to capture Long Yu, the culprit, and failed to learn Long Yu's identity, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race had confirmed one thing, which was that the opponent they were faced with could not resist them when they were united, or they would have been killed collectively. That gave the demigods of the Ice-Fire race a lot of confidence. At the very least, the opponent was not as strong as they imagined and could still be defeated, which gave them some hope. Then, more than 30 demigods of the Ice-Fire race were finally divided into two teams. One of the teams was led by the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, and the other team was led by two demigods of the Ice-Fire race whose strength density was more than 50 times. They split up to clear the hunters of Tartarian that appeared everywhere. So far, the seeds of Blood Spirit on all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race have been found and cleared. Then, they were taught that the targets of the seeds of Blood Spirit were demigods whose strength density was less than 20 times, which gave them a deeper understanding of a certain aspect of the opponent that hadn't shown up yet. Of course, they had already speculated that it was not the same person who did it. Otherwise, how could a person who could kill experts whose strength density was 50 times higher only have the seeds of Blood Spirit on the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was 20 times higher? At this moment, Long Yu did not know that the enemy's team had been divided into two. Because the seeds of Blood Spirit had been cleared, Long Yu did not even know where the enemy was at this moment. But very soon he found out. According to the message from the hunters of Tartarian, it had been discovered that the enemy had appeared in two different places to clear the hunters of Tartarian at the same time. Obviously, the enemy had been divided into two teams. One is led by the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, and the other is led by two demigods whose strength density is 50 times higher. In that case, I'll pick the team whose strength density is 50 times higher first and kill them all. Long Yu pondered for a moment and realized that this could very well be a trap. However, he didn't have anything to worry about right now. Even if he failed, he wouldn't expose his identity and whereabouts and wouldn't put himself in danger. They've entered a space-time pathway. Let's do it. Long Yu followed them into the space-time pathway and turned into the divine symbol of space without a sound. Then, he disappeared into the power of the 5 elements at the edge of the space-time pathway. He knew that in this space-time pathway, the 2 demigods of the ice-fire race, led by the 2 demigods of the ice-fire race whose strength density was more than 50 times higher, were all there. They were trying to clear the hunters of Tartarian in another place through the space-time pathway. Now that he had turned into the divine symbol of space and almost became one with the space-time pathway, he found that it was true. The dozen demigods of the ice-fire race were walking forward unhurriedly and did not seem to be in a hurry at all. Their attitude seems to be luring me to attack. However, if they want to attack me, then so be it. If it's a trap, then so be it. If they can't catch me anyway, they'll kill as many as they can. Thinking to himself, Long Yu raged at the space-time pathway with the storm condensed by the power of the 5 elements. The appearance of the storm of the 5 elements immediately raised the enemy's vigilance. Then, in the next moment, as if a message had been sent, the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race suddenly appeared at the entrance of the space-time pathway. Long Yu was somewhat surprised how the enemy had sent the message. Did the enemy have the same situation as him and the Saint Emperor? Or rather, the situation allowed 2 of the demigods to know where the enemy was immediately, which was why the enemy could come so quickly. It was a trap. The enemy had lured Long Yu to show up by dividing the team, and then quickly attacked Long Yu from both sides. Under normal circumstances, it was very possible that Long Yu would have been captured. But it was a pity that Long Yu had turned into the divine symbol of space at this moment. The enemy could not find any trace of him at all. The storm condensed by the power of the 5 elements roared, but it was completely blocked by the demigod of the ice-fire race whose strength density was 60 times higher. It could not hurt any of the demigods of the ice-fire race at all. The enemy had indeed lured Long Yu out, but they still could not see what Long Yu was, and they did not know how Long Yu made use of the power of the 5 elements in the space-time pathway. Seeing that it was impossible to kill the enemy, Long Yu stopped using the power of the 5 elements. He had estimated that a demigod whose strength density was 60 times higher would be able to resist such an attack, and it seemed that it was indeed so. It was impossible for Long Yu to show up, and he could not dismantle the space-time pathway under such circumstances. He could only give up and quietly retreat from the space-time pathway. The ice-fire race is really not easy to deal with. If Long Yu hadn't turned into the divine symbol of space, he would have been caught like a turtle in a jar. It was a pity that he had enough trump cards. After this trap, he would not act rashly again. It was not so easy to completely kill a demigod of a race that was prepared. It was mainly because Long Yu was not strong enough to kill the team that the enemy had gathered together. That was why he was in such a passive situation. Speaking of which, if Long Yu was so strong, he wouldn't have taken action in the territory of the ice-fire race, but deeper into the wild sand space zone. In any case, it will take at least 2 to 3 months for Man, Xian, and Chihua to come out of the Sun Ting ancient realm. More importantly, they won't come out at the same time. I have to take care of the demigods of the ice-fire race before that. Long Yu was deep in thought. Chapter 1689. After exiting the space-time tunnel, Long Yu activated the Void Nether Dragon Blade and teleported into the distance, not leaving any traces behind. At this moment, he felt that his compatibility with the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger had reached a higher level. In other words, he had finally awakened the 5th level of the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger, Void Assault. This awakening skill seems to have been specially made for me. When Long Yu sensed the message from Small Void Spiritual Sense, he immediately felt a burst of joy. This awakening skill could be used in the current situation. To put it simply, it was not a means of attack, but a means of transferring attacks. As long as the space-time coordinates of the opponents were located, Long Yu could directly transfer any attack to that space-time coordinate through the Void Assault. This was the only way for Long Yu to kill the opponents without showing up. Also, since the Void Assault was soundless, it was impossible for the opponents to detect it in advance. Even if all the demigods of the opponents gathered together, it would not be a problem for Long Yu to kill them one by one. What Long Yu was hesitating about was how to kill the weaker demigods of the Ice-Fire race. If it was the Dark Flame Ghost, the Ice-Fire race might be able to tell that it was the final treasure in the Eclipse Moon Ancient Realm. But on second thought, Long Yu realized that even if they could tell, it was not like the Six-Winged race knew that the final treasure was taken by a human, so it did not matter if it was exposed. This awakening skill came at the right time. With this awakening skill, I can totally kill all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race with a strength density of more than 40 times. Long Yu was excited. There were 7 demigods of the Ice-Fire race with a strength density of more than 40 times. 2 of them had been killed by Long Yu near the Sun Ting Ancient Realm, and the remaining 5 had gathered together. The key now is the space-time coordinates. The space-time coordinates of the opponents are not so easy to get. Little Void's soul consciousness came. Why do I have to get their space-time coordinates in person? I could just lure them to the place I've arranged. Long Yu already had a plan in mind, and then he started to carry it out. He put the Hunters of Tartarus on an important cultivation planet of the Ice-Fire race. Then, countless Hunters of Tartarus started to wreak havoc on the planet. There were 5 areas where the Hunters of Tartarus were densely packed. The space-time coordinates of those 5 areas had been collected by Long Yu. Then, he left the cultivation planet. Moreover, he went far away from this cultivation planet. He went to a place that was several domains away to observe the situation. As long as there were space-time coordinates, the Void Airstrike would be able to send any attack over. The prerequisite was that the attack would not exceed the distance of 68 domains. This was also the furthest distance that Long Yu could create through the space-time corridor. Long Yu sensed the movements of the 9 Nether Hunters from a distance, then took out the Dark Flame Ghost and made his preparations. Very soon, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race arrived at the cultivation planet and began to clean up the Hunters of Tartarus on the entire planet. The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race and the 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, with a power density of more than 50 times, stayed on guard outside the cultivation planet as usual. Then, the 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, with a power density of more than 40 times, led the others to the surface of the cultivation planet to clean up. In any case, they had to control the damage and losses caused by the Hunters of Tartarus within a certain range. Unfortunately, they did not expect that there was already a trap waiting for them in this place. They're almost here. Get ready. Through the Hunters of Tartarus, Long Yu learned what the demigods of the Ice-Fire race were doing. When the Hunters of the 5 Hunters of Tartarus in the densest area started to be cleaned up, he launched 5 Void Assaults without any hesitation. Using the 2 killer moves, Dark Flame Ghost and Death Prison of 4 symbols, he directly landed on the 5 areas of the cultivation planet through the Void Assaults. The 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race, with a power density of more than 40 times, did not sense the approaching danger at all. By the time the attacks arrived, it was already too late. The pitch-black flames of the Lone Flame Ghosts and the aura of death from the 4 symbols prison eroded their bodies and weakened their power tenfold at the same time. Under such circumstances, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race couldn't resist Long Yu's fatal attacks at all. Accompanied by the melodious music of the zither, the 5 demigods of the Ice-Fire race were completely killed without any ability to resist. At the same time, 3 demigods of the Ice-Fire race who were at the same space-time coordinates were also killed. They were close to each other, but they were still killed. The space-time coordinates that Long Yu collected were completely collected by the Hunters of Tartarus. Of course, there was no error at all. They gave Long Yu clear coordinates directly and clearly. 8 of them were killed at once. Through the remaining Hunters of the 9 Nether, Long Yu found out about this news, and immediately rejoiced at the fact that he was able to kill from the void. If he did not have this method, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to be able to eliminate a portion of the other party's power. But right now, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race were killed so easily. In such a case, Long you didn't need to think too much. The enemy only had the last 3 strongest demigods that could pose a threat to Long Yu. 2 of them could be dealt with by the storm of the power of the 5 elements. As for the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, Long Yu planned to fight him one-on-one as the last, so that he could test his ability in a head-on battle. When the 8 demigods of the Ice-Fire race were killed at the same time on the cultivation planet, the enemy was immediately alarmed. The 3 strongest demigods of the Ice-Fire race came as soon as possible, but they could only see their bodies. It's the air of the divine language of shadow. It's the air of a high-level source item. But why did the attack appear out of nowhere? Who has such an ability? The 3 strongest demigods of the Ice-Fire race all felt a chill. They had never seen such an attack before. With them around, it was certain that there were no aliens nearby. Then, where did the attack come from? Right when they were thinking, a bridge bathed in the rain suddenly appeared in the void nearby. The air of the divine language of space spread out from the bridge and spread to the surroundings. What's this? The demigods of the Ice-Fire race found it strange, but they didn't act recklessly. Instead, they stared at the half of the bridge, paying attention to any changes. However, after waiting for a long time, the bridge didn't change at all, which made them more or less confused. After waiting for about 2 hours, the remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race finally cleaned up all the hunters of Tartarus on the cultivation planet below. Then, all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race gathered together again. It was a pity that the 8 demigods of the Ice-Fire race who had just died were gone. That made the remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race extremely angry, but they also had a deep sense of helplessness. They didn't even know where their opponents were. How could they fight against their opponents? If it were a head-on battle, they wouldn't be able to defeat their opponents. However, the situation right now was truly frustrating. Under such circumstances, the strange bridge that appeared in the void nearby really raised their suspicions. Should they go there? That was a problem. The remaining 20 or so demigods of the Ice-Fire race looked at the bridge that was surrounded by the curtain of rain and could not make up their mind. It was a broken bridge. Judging from the space runes that it emitted, it should be a teleportation channel that was similar to a space-time tunnel. There was no telling where it led to and whether or not anything would come through the bridge. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race had been waiting here. They dared not approach the broken bridge under the rain because it was too suspicious. The broken bridge must have something to do with the guys who killed the demigods of the Ice-Fire race. Since it appeared here, it couldn't be a flaw, but a bait to lure them. Time went by. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race did not dare to take action. However, the news from various places was not bad. After the broken bridge appeared in the rain, there were no more hunters of Netherworld in the entire territory of the Ice-Fire race, as if they had all vanished. It was good news for the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, and made them all take a breath in relief. Around the half of the broken bridge under the rain, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race began to set up defense and attack arrays, as well as other kinds of arrays. They were all set up and surrounded the broken bridge. Then, they observed around the broken bridge. None of the demigods of the Ice-Fire race dared to be alone at all, fearing that they would die for no reason. Even the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, with a power density of more than 40 times, had died uncannily. The other demigods of the Ice-Fire race had been on high alert and did not dare to do anything. It's a pity that they didn't take the bait and send the guy with a power density of more than 50 times to the bridge. Otherwise, I could have teleported that guy to me and killed him first. Long Yu felt that it was a pity. He directly created a primordial bridge of rain and connected it to the vicinity of the training planet. He intentionally let the enemy see it in order to attract their attention. 3 days later, seeing that the enemy did not take the bait, Long Yu left the vicinity and went to the place where the demigods were from another direction. He began to make arrangements around the area. It was a fatal trap, which meant that Long Yu was going to make the final slaughter on the remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race. One after another, immemorial rain bridges appeared in this area. More than a dozen immemorial rain bridges appeared in the vicinity of 3 or 4 domains. Every bridge of rain was made of 2 broken bridges, which connected the 2 ends of time and space. The dozen bridges of rain constituted a spatial network. Long Yu could travel freely in the spatial network. All that was left to do was to lure the enemy to step on one of the broken bridges. As long as the enemy stepped on one of the broken bridges, it would be Long Yu's time. Chapter 1690. Long Yu set up a web of time and space connected by the primordial rain bridges near the enemy's cultivation planet. Then, he activated some of the dark creatures in the Dragon Bone Tower and made them appear in front of the demigods of the Ice-Fire race through the primordial rain bridges. At this moment, broken bridges appeared around the Ice-Fire race, which made them extremely nervous. They were on guard against any creatures that might appear on the broken bridges at any time. Therefore, when Long Yu activated the dark creatures that the Silk race had transformed into and showed up on the broken bridges, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race were rather surprised. The Silk race? That was a regular race at the edge of the wild sand space zone. They were not particularly powerful. In the eyes of the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, the Silk race was even an insignificant race. How could the Silk race come to the Ice-Fire race and cause such a great trouble? But very soon, they found something unusual. They could tell that the demigods of the Silk race that appeared before them were not real Silk race demigods, but demigods of the Silk race that had lost their consciousness and been modified. Before the demigods of the Ice-Fire race figured out how to deal with such a situation, the demigods of the Silk race took action first. The demigods of the Silk race, who had been transformed into dark creatures, simply took action and joined hands. 10 dark creatures transformed from demigods of the Silk race immediately seized 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race that were 30 times more in number. The 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race were sent to one of the primordial rain bridges and disappeared before the demigods of the Ice-Fire race. The whole operation was done smoothly without giving the demigods of the Ice-Fire race any time to react. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race were still in shock when the demigods of the Silk race took action as soon as they showed up. Help! The remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race did not hesitate at all. They could not watch the demigods of their race be captured without doing anything. If they did that, the cohesion of the remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race would be broken, which might lead to some bad situations in case of emergencies. It was even possible that all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race would be separated and forced to seek their own survival. Such things had happened to other alien species before. Therefore, after the 2 demigods of the Ice-Fire race were captured, the remaining demigods of the Ice-Fire race simply caught up and threw themselves onto one of the primordial bridges of rain. Then, they discovered that the curtains of rain had slowed down the circulation of power in their bodies, which had indirectly weakened their battle prowess. However, this didn't affect them too much. They continued to move forward and soon passed through the immemorial bridge of rain, arriving at another spatial zone that was connected to the broken bridge. Then they realized that not all of them had come over. Instead, they were divided into 2 groups. One of the groups stayed on the other side of the broken bridge and did not manage to teleport over. The broken bridge had actually cut off their team halfway through the teleportation. All of a sudden, the demigods of the Ice-Fire race became more vigilant than ever. That was because one of their demigods, whose strength density was more than 50 times, was left on the original side and did not follow them over. Then, they found that it was already impossible for them to go back, because the primordial bridge of rain had been completely sealed and disappeared. Not a single trace was left. Let's go back. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race that came over made the decision immediately. They planned to activate their power as quickly as possible and build a space-time tunnel to return to the previous training planet. However, After a few seconds, when they entered the space-time tunnel, they found that the origin storm of the 5 elements was raging in the space-time tunnel. By the time the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race passed through the space-time tunnel and reached the previous training planet, he found that he was one step too late. The 3 demigods of the ice-fire race that were left on the training planet, including one whose strength density was more than 50 times, had completely disappeared. There was only a brief battle left where they were, but there was no information about the enemy. Another 3 were killed, and one of the leaders of the ice-fire race that had a strength density more than 50 times was killed. The rest of the demigods of the ice-fire race were deeply traumatized, letting them know that the guy they were faced with was too horrifying. He had eliminated them separately through all kinds of methods. However, they had no ability to resist at all. Therefore, they decided not to separate and stay together under any circumstances. They also ignored the space-time net of the primordial bridge of rain around them. But it was not up to them anymore. Now, there was no need for Long Yu to hide anymore. The strongest demigod of the ice-fire race that had a strength density more than 50 times, and the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race that had a strength density more than 60 times were all left. The rest were just small fries that posed no threat to him at all. Under such circumstances, even if it was a head-on confrontation, Long Yu was confident that he could win. Therefore, he showed up directly. As the absolute space domain was released, it completely covered the nearby space. Then, Long Yu showed up. When Long Yu showed up before the demigods of the ice-fire race, his vibe made them realize that the whole thing was probably caused by this guy of an unknown race. However, this guy's strength density was only 34 times. How could such a being be able to fool so many demigods of the ice-fire race? That was impossible. The demigods of the ice-fire race all had a bad feeling, but there was really no stronger enemy in front of them. Long Yu was their only choice of attack. However, the demigods of the ice-fire race also considered that now that Long Yu had shown up voluntarily, he must be confident that he could annihilate them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come out to get himself killed. In case of accidents, the demigods of the ice-fire race all began to perform their own techniques and began to probe and investigate Long Yu. As it turned out, there was no problem. This guy was neither an illusion nor a clone. Judging from his spirit and soul, he was a real individual. If they killed Long Yu, they would definitely kill him for good. There were no other possibilities. Therefore, the demigods of the ice-fire race were all excited. Wasn't this alien race demigod who looked so weak just showing up in front of them? Wasn't he asking to be killed? However, they were still very vigilant and did not move forward recklessly. At this moment, they discovered a problem, which was that the arrays that they had set up in this area in advance had all disappeared. They weren't dismantled, but they had already been triggered and exploded. In the area where those arrays existed, there were the remains of some dark creatures of the Silk race. Those were the things that Long Yu sacrificed so that they could trigger all the arrays in the area. In that case, they would not have absolute confidence. Otherwise, if these arrays were to be triggered, even Long Yu would be completely dead. There would be no way for him to survive. But at this moment, the situation was very unfavorable for the demigods of the ice-fire race. A great battle was about to break out. At this moment, Long Yu let the others out of his small world. Ji Tao, Consort Yu, and Red Oriole came out of Long Yu's small world and charged at the opponents that they had arranged beforehand. I'll stall the demigod of the ice-fire race that has a density of more than 50 times. The body of the dragon of 9 nether that Ji Tao occupied charged at the second strongest demigod of the ice-fire race. Infinite power of the divine language of 9 nether burst out from her body and enshrouded the space zone nearby. In particular, the demigod of the ice-fire race that had a density of more than 50 times was dragged into it. Red Oriole and Consort Yu, on the other hand, moved forward hand in hand and blocked all the remaining demigods of the ice-fire race with their own methods. The last demigod of the ice-fire race that had a density of 60 times was left to Long Yu. After assigning their respective opponents, Long Yu knew that the most difficult moment had come. However, as long as he won this battle, he would be able to occupy the entire territory of the Ice-Fire race. As long as he pretended to be the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, he would be able to rule the entire Ice-Fire race and loot all the training resources in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. That was the Ice-Fire race. The training resources, there were dozens of times more than that of the human race and the demon race combined. It was not hard to imagine how much improvement Long Yu would have if he had those training resources, especially for the people in the Void Galaxy. How many people would become Grand Dominators? How many people would have the opportunity to step into the demigod level? It was hard to imagine. Now that I've been given a chance, I have to seize it. Thinking to himself, Long Yu stared at the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race with scorching eyes. The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race didn't expect that it would be an alien demigod with a density of 34 times, instead of the dragon demigod with a density of more than 40 times. Where did this dragon demigod come from? The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race couldn't figure it out when it saw Ji Tao. But now is not the time to think about such things. It was a moment of life and death for the entire Ice-Fire race. It had to defeat this guy in front of it. The two wings of light on the back of the demigod of the Ice-Fire race suddenly flashed. The power of ice and the power of fire intertwined and condensed into a beam of light that was a mixture of ice and fire, which swept toward Long Yu. It didn't wait for Long Yu to attack. Instead, it took the initiative to attack, trying to kill Long Yu directly. However, Long Yu didn't care. He narrowed his eyes and sensed the terrifying power in the attack. He knew that once it burst out on him, he wouldn't even have a chance to restore the Devil Dust Heart. Even the Devil Dust Heart would be destroyed. Therefore, he couldn't let this attack hit him. The next moment, the ancient bridge of rain appeared in front of him. Then he stepped on the bridge and appeared behind the demigod of the Ice-Fire race. Chapter 1691. The strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, whose strength density was 60 times, was not invincible for Long Yu. However, in a head-on clash, he was definitely no match for the enemy. Therefore, after avoiding the enemy's first wave of attack, Long Yu activated his 8 ultimate bloodlines without any hesitation. The 8 special bloodlines in his body were instantly ignited, making all the blood in his body boil. Long Yu's strength density soared to 42 times at this moment. Then, he released the Boundless Grasp, and the invisible hand made of the eternal level hell-shocking divine symbols instantly grasped the body of the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race. Then, the star branding mark was activated. The demigod of the Ice-Fire race was directly weakened to 52 times, and it seemed to be completely dumbfounded. The original strength density of 60 times versus the strength density of 34 times was basically suppressed, and there was no chance for Long Yu to make a comeback. But how did it become 42 times versus 52 in the blink of an eye? The two sides were only 10 times different in strength density. Under such circumstances, if the guy with the lower strength density had any special methods, it would be very easy for him to make a comeback. Also, after what happened a while ago, the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race was now certain that Long Yu must have some extremely special abilities. If those abilities were used in a battle, it was very likely that the victory would be decided. The untraceable means alone were already frightening, and the means to control the space-time tunnel was too weird. However, at this moment, the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race had no other choice but to fight Long Yu. Life and death depended on this battle. Not only its own life and death, but the entire Ice-Fire race would also be affected. Once all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race died, the entire Ice-Fire race would not be able to survive in this cosmos, and it wouldn't be long before they completely perished. The Ice Divine symbols and the Fire Divine symbols entangled again, condensing in a countless rain of ice and fire, which appeared out of nowhere in the void from all directions and poured down at where Long Yu was right now. Mirror City. Long Yu raised his hand and took out the Divine Mirror Stone, which was a beginner-level modified Divine Source item. Then, he used the hell-shocking Divine Script to construct a Mirror City beside him. Countless mirrors appeared, completely blocking the torrential rain of ice and fire outside of Mirror City. It was unable to harm Long Yu in the slightest. Not only could this divine source item be used to attack, but it could also be used for defense. In fact, defense was its most basic purpose. If it was used to attack, it would be a complete waste of its effectiveness. Once again, the attacks of both sides canceled each other out. Since his opponent's attack was ineffective, Long Yu mercilessly began his counterattack. He instantly activated the Dark Flame Ghostly Chains, which were a high-grade modified divine source artifact. Countless chains burning with pitch-black flames instantly flickered and spread throughout the entire space. Countless iron chains intertwined and spread out like an enormous cage, trapping the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race. Kill! The iron chains instantly tightened, and pitch-black flames engulfed the entire ice-fire race demigod. In the next moment, an ice mountain suddenly appeared where the ice-fire race demigod was, as if it had wandered out of thin air. The entire ice mountain emitted an aura that could freeze the entire world, dispersing the overwhelming black flames. Although it couldn't destroy the dark flame ghostly chains, it could stop the chains of dark flames from damaging the ice fire race demigod. The ice mountain appeared and dispelled the black flames. The body of the ice fire race demigod was clearly presented in front of Long Yu again. Then, the ice mountain passed through the void and directly appeared around Long Yu. This wasn't just a method of defense, but also a method of attack and control. The Absolute Zero Ice Mountain could not only seal the opponent in ice, but it could also completely freeze the core of the opponent's power with the absolute zero temperature, rendering them unable to use any other methods. It was a pity, world-cleansing soul mirror. As soon as Long Yu raised his hand, the power of the world-cleansing body instantly condensed into a layer of mirror, which surrounded him and bounced the ice mountain back. The rebound this time wasn't much stronger, but it was still a bit stronger than the ice mountain itself. It directly fell on the head of the strongest ice fire race demigod. The situation gave the strongest ice fire race demigod a fright. It hurriedly unleashed a burst of purple flame god art and finally melted the ice mountain, saving itself from being controlled and frozen. However, at this moment, Long Yu's attack came again. Void Burial. The power of the water element directly appeared in the void where the opponent was condensed and then burst out, forming a horrifying void burial vortex. Everything that was sucked into it would be turned into ashes. This was a method activated by the Void Ghost Dragon Blade after another awakening, and its destructive power was twice as powerful as before. However, it was still a bit difficult to deal with the strongest ice fire race demigod. Therefore, Long Yu saw through it, so he added another move for Symbol's Hell. For kinds of power that contained the air of death quickly spread out in the space and enshrouded the opponent. The air of death corroded the opponent's body, and together with the destructive power of Void Burial, the opponent couldn't resist for a while. A lot of the air of death had corroded the opponent's body, but it was useless. The power of ice and fire burst out of the opponent's body, and countless purple flames spread out of it, driving all the air of death out of its body. Even Void Burial could not completely kill the strongest ice fire race demigod. Its body was still very sturdy, and it could withstand extremely powerful attacks without being hurt. It was similar to Long Yu, but the opponent's body was even stronger than Long Yu's. The wings of ice and fire emitted cold brilliance, standing in the void like a god. The purple flames immediately spread out, like the fire of doomsday. It fell from the sky and burned in the void, trapping Long Yu and even further sealing the space nearby. Even the primordial bridge of rain couldn't be activated. Long Yu could only take this attack head-on. Screen of 1,000 feathers. The Sage Emperor was still in Long Yu's small world. Seeing this, he directly activated the 1,000 Feathers Flight and fused it with the Dragon Bone Tower, turning it into 1,000 dragon bones and feathers, protecting Long Yu. The strength density of the two sides was 10 times different, and the gap was still very big. Therefore, Long Yu's two killing moves were not very effective against the opponent, and the opponent's attack was also something that Long Yu couldn't underestimate. If he was burned by the purple flames, even Long Yu's demon dust heart would probably be burned, and he wouldn't be able to recover. If that happened, he would really die. The screen of 1,000 feathers spread out, and its layers were burned to ashes by the purple firestorm. However, it was still trying hard to regenerate, protecting Long Yu. No, it's too powerful. I can't resist it. Long Yu's heart skipped a beat. Seeing that the 1,000 layers of the screen of 1,000 feathers were quickly burned to ashes, he knew that this method alone wouldn't be able to resist the opponent's attack. However, at the next moment, countless phantom dragon bones and feathers were emitted from the dragon bone 1,000 feathers, and then projected into the surrounding flames. These phantom dragon bones and feathers actually condensed into a screen of 1,000 feathers, and a defensive barrier was opened. Almost 10,000 phantom dragon bones and feathers appeared in the void. 10,000 feathers block river. This was the second awakening skill of the dragon bone 1,000 feathers, and it was an upgraded version of the screen of 1,000 feathers. The defensive barrier condensed by the phantom dragon bones and feathers was similar to a layer of the screen of 1,000 feathers, but the number was 10 times more. 10,000 feathers block river, and even the autumn sun could be blocked. It could maintain summer and prevent winter from entering. This name appeared in Long Yu's mind, and he felt a little strange. However, he didn't think too much about this now. When the phantom dragon bones and feathers appeared and condensed into a defensive barrier, the surrounding purple flames were blocked for a moment. Then, under the defensive barrier of the dragon bones and feathers, the purple flames were finally completely extinguished. The dragon bone 1,000 feathers circled around Long Yu, making him look like a god. It was about time. The opponent was still in a state of shock. After a powerful trump card failed to kill Long Yu, there would definitely be a gap in his mind. At this moment, the divinized ability of the Ball of 9 Serenities appeared. An enormous shadow of a divine dragon appeared behind Long Yu's back. Then, a horrifying sphere of the netherworld was condensed in the void. The horrifying power of time that leaked out dragged the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race into the turbulence of the gap of time. Seizing this opportunity, Long Yu was ready to kill. Guqin Rune, activate. Dark Flames mistake. Go. Previously, Long Yu had been hiding the effect of the Guqin Rune. Now that it had suddenly erupted, the opponent had no ability to resist at all. The Guqin Rune and the divinized ability of the Ball of 9 Serenities were activated at the same time. The opponent had no intention of resisting and was completely dumbfounded. Then, a small wisp of flames from the Dark Flame Ghost condensed into the Dark Flame's mistake and continuously eroded through the gaps in the opponent's power. In an instant, it arrived near the opponent's power core and completely destroyed one of the fire-type power cores. Even the Dark Flame's mistake was a bit strained to deal with the body of the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race. After all, the opponent's body was quite strong, and even the gaps in the body weren't that easy to penetrate. It was already quite good to be able to destroy one of the opponent's power cores. In a short period of time, under the control of the Ball of 9 Serenities, Long Yu no longer had the strength to destroy the opponent's ice power core. Even so, he had basically won. This was because the ice-fire race wasn't that scary after losing one of its power cores. It was like a human who had lost an arm in the Age of Mortals. Not only did they lose half of their combat strength, it even affected the balance of power in their bodies, making it extremely difficult for them to activate their power. When the opponent woke up and realized the state he was in, he immediately knew that the situation was over. For symbols Death Prison, activate. The Dark Flame Ghost Chain, activate. The strongest demigod of the ice-fire race was completely trapped and then corroded by the power of death. Very soon, his spirit and soul disappeared without a trace in a state of powerlessness to resist. Chapter 1692. Long Yu's current way of fighting was basically one-sided. If the first wave of the divinized technique of the Ball of Tartarus failed to kill or heavily wound the opponent, then there would be no need for Long Yu to fight anymore. Fortunately, up until now, the opponents that Long Yu had chosen hadn't exceeded the scope of what he could handle. Therefore, every time the divinized technique of the Ball of Tartarus appeared, the opponent was basically dead. It was quite a good feeling. As long as he took advantage of the opponent's carelessness and performed all his methods, the opponent would be killed. However, there was a drawback to this way of fighting. The drawback was that Long Yu could only deal with one such strong opponent at a time. If there was an alien demigod of similar level nearby, he would not have more power to deal with the other demigod after using the divinized technique of the Ball of Tartarus, and the other demigod would be alarmed. Therefore, Long Yu tried to avoid such a situation. The strongest demigod of the ice and fire race with 60 times the power density had finally been killed by Long Yu. Then, the remaining demigods of the ice and fire race were no longer a threat. In the absolute space domain, all the demigods were cleared. Long Yu led everybody and devoured the corpses of the demigods first. Then he found a lot of things from the remains of their small worlds. What Long Yu cared about were the demigod-like items. Right now, he and the girls who had become demigods all had demigod-like items. However, more people in the Void Galaxy were about to become demigods, so more demigod-like items were needed. To Long Yu's delight, he found a middle-level modified demigod-like item from the remains of the small world of the strongest demigod of the ice and fire race that had 60 times the power density. When the opponent was fighting with him, he didn't even have the time to use this method before he was completely killed by Long Yu. All of this was because the effects of a sphere of 9 underworlds were too strong. The other party no longer had any ability to resist. Of course, at the end of the day, it was because the other party was not strong enough. Within the ancient god's brain domain, there weren't any useful ancient god tattoos. Otherwise, only some special ancient god tattoos would be able to withstand Long Yu's attack. What a pity! Since that's the case, these things now belong to our human clan and the demon clan. Long Yu's lips curled. He collected all the items in the small world of the demigods of the Ice God clan and planned to distribute them to the people of the Void Galaxy after they came out of the Sun Ting ancient realm. As for the mid-level modified divine-level item that he got from the debris of the small world of the strongest demigod from the Ice-Fire race, Long Yu gave it to Consort Yu. After all, Consort Yu was his comrade in the battle against the Ice-Fire tribe, and Consort Yu already had a mid-tier source artifact. It would be more appropriate to give this new mid-tier source artifact to Consort Yu. Of course, the girls didn't particularly care about that now. After all, if things went on like this, they would soon get more training resources, including divine-level items, and the Ice-Fire race's action was just the beginning. It could be said that the entire Wild Sandstar Zone had become Long Yu's hunting ground. The territory of the Ice-Fire race was now in their pocket. Their next goal was to collect enough information before making a decision. Let's collect the spoils first. Then, it's time to wait for them to come out of the Sun Ting ancient realm. Long Yu said to the girls. Now, it was time for the girls to deal with the people of the Void Galaxy, because Long Yu had more things to do. He needed to pretend to be the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, and pacify the Ice-Fire race that was already in a mess. Internally, he needed to find a way to loot all the training resources of the Ice-Fire race, and make sure that the news of the death of all the demigods of the Ice-Fire race didn't get out. On the other hand, he needed to negotiate with the other alien races around the Ice-Fire race's territory on behalf of the Ice-Fire race, and get the key information about the other alien races while keeping the great changes of the Ice-Fire race a secret. He also needed to rely on Red Oriole's seed of Blood Spirit. But now is not a good time. Long Yu had to stabilize the Ice-Fire race first. He could sneak into a powerful race like the Six-Winged race without anyone noticing. Now that the demigods of the Ice-Fire race were gone, and Long Yu pretended to be the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, the other creatures of the Ice-Fire race wouldn't be able to tell the difference between him and the original demigod of the Ice-Fire race. It was safe to say that from now on, the territory of the Ice-Fire race would belong to Long Yu. The miracles, temples, and sources of godly symbols all belonged to Long Yu and the rest of them. If it weren't for the fact that the human race and the demon race were not strong enough as a whole, it wouldn't be a problem to move all the human race and demons to this place. Long Yu, Consort Yu, and the other girls all took action separately. Long Yu activated the Book of Shadows and pretended to be the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race. Then, he appeared on a training planet in the core area of the Ice-Fire race's territory and told all the creatures of the Ice-Fire race a piece of news. The other demigods of the Ice-Fire race were all killed in the battle, and he was the only one left. He managed to kill his opponent and protect the entire territory of the Ice-Fire race. He hoped that the creatures of the Ice-Fire race would work hard and produce more demigods. Otherwise, the entire Ice-Fire race would probably decline because of this. The news shocked all the creatures in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. The demigods of the Ice-Fire race, except for the strongest one, were all dead. That was more than 30 demigods, and many of them were the mainstays of the Ice-Fire race. Many creatures began to doubt whether or not the strongest demigod could survive in the void that was surrounded by such strong enemies. At least some of the galaxies would have to be ceded to other alien races, right? Otherwise, it would be impossible to resist the attacks from the alien races from all directions. Of course, as long as the strongest demigod was here, the heritage of the Ice-Fire race would definitely be preserved. That was not a problem. More importantly, the Ice-Fire race had been so weakened that they might not be able to recover even after hundreds of years. As for what the creatures of the Ice-Fire race thought, Long Yu didn't care. He only cared about how many training resources there were in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. Many demigods of the Ice-Fire race were in their residences on the major training planets. Long Yu planned to visit all of them and take out some of the training resources. Of course, he wouldn't take all of the cultivation planets away, because it would be too suspicious if he did. On the surface, he had to maintain the impression that all the training resources were used to train the descendants of the Ice-Fire race. If he took all of them away, it would be very unreasonable and raise the suspicion of other creatures of the Ice-Fire race. Although Long Yu wasn't afraid of the creatures of the Ice-Fire race, it would be bad if other alien races were hiding in the territory of the Ice-Fire race and found out about it. Once the news that an alien race had invaded and controlled the Ice-Fire race was spread out, other alien races would definitely be united against the enemy. But now, if only one demigod of the Ice-Fire race was left alive, other alien races would definitely covet the territory of the Ice-Fire race. The concept between the two was still different. 3 months passed. As the strongest demigod of the Ice-Fire race, Long Yu had killed dozens of alien demigods that intended to invade the territory of the Ice-Fire race, which greatly intimidated the alien races nearby and made them not dare to mess with the Ice-Fire race for now. Although he didn't know what was going on, this strongest demigod of the Ice God race could immediately arrive at the place and annihilate the invaders, even if they were attacking the territory of the Ice-Fire race from multiple directions at the same time. Of course, nobody knew how it did it, because those who saw it were all dead. It wasn't difficult for Long Yu. First of all, he had Red Oriole's seed of Blood Spirit, which had been planted on the weaker demigods of a few alien races nearby, so he knew most of the movements of those alien races. Then, in terms of traveling, he had the Primordial Bridge of Rain. No matter where the enemy attacked, Long Yu could always arrive as soon as possible. Finally, in terms of battles, Long Yu ended the battles directly every time. Inside the absolute space domain, no message could be sent out. He simply appeared in the form of Long Yu. Even if the enemy knew, there was nothing they could do, because they would be killed by Long Yu very soon. Just like that, after all that, the Ice-Fire race was very popular in the territory. Everybody felt that the Ice-Fire race was not declining, but rising because of it. Then, Long Yu seized a lot of training resources in the territory with the excuse that he needed a breakthrough. For example, he seized more than 500 level 1 heavenly crystal creation items in total, and he didn't encounter any resistance, because he was the guardian of the Ice-Fire race. If the strongest demigod wanted a breakthrough, he needed training resources. How could the other ice fire race stop him? They all hoped that he could become stronger and protect the entire territory of the ice fire race. They couldn't wait to give all the training resources they could to Longyu. However, they still couldn't give some necessary survival training resources to Longyu. After all, the other creatures of the ice fire race also needed to develop. The level 1 heavenly crystal creation items were extremely rare treasures in the human race and the demon race. The territories of the two races combined could only produce less than 10 of them every year. But now, Longyu had directly plundered 500 of them. That was equivalent to the output of the human race and the demon race in 50 years. It was not hard to imagine how abundant Longyu had plundered this time, and that was only a part of it. Some pills and weapons were plundered by Longyu. He was going to reforge them into weapons and pills that the people in the Void Galaxy could use. There were also other training resources and creation items. Everything added up was almost unimaginable for Longyu in the past. This was the accumulation of an entire alien race. And now, what Longyu had obtained was only a small part of it. He still needed to stay in this place for a long time, so he couldn't kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. He had a plan to seize the training resources in the enemy's territory. After all, if he took too much at once, the people in the Void Galaxy wouldn't be able to digest it all. At this time, people finally began to come out of the Sun Ting ancient realm. Chapter 1693. After 3 months in the Sun Ting ancient realm, people finally started to come out. Those who came out first didn't reach the demigod level. They were still at the level 7 Great Dominator level. However, 1 or 2 of their techniques had become deified techniques, and they had obtained a lot of good stuff in the Sun Ting ancient realm. Some even opened the ancient god brain field. Among the 325 people, those who could open the ancient god brain field were much fewer than those who could reach the demigod level. Only 2 or 3 people could do it. Not only did they need luck, but they also needed to have a certain level of talent. In the beginning, Longyu didn't count what they had obtained in the Sun Ting ancient realm. He asked Consort Yu and the others to manage it. He continued to pretend to be the strongest demigod of the ice fire race, and kept stealing resources from the territory of the ice fire race. At the same time, he collected information about other alien races in the entire Wild Sandstar Zone. Soon, he had a better understanding of the entire Wild Sandstar Zone. In the Wild Sandstar Zone, the 2 strongest races were undoubtedly the Oracle race and the Nature race. Longyu had already met these 2 races in the eroding Moon ancient realm. They were mortal enemies. Whether it's the Oracle race or the Nature race, they are all as strong as the 6-winged race, the mechanical race, and the sword race. It's impossible for me to target those 2 races for the time being. Longyu was very clear about this. He didn't have the strength to do so at the moment. However, according to the current development trend, he could consider dealing with the Oracle race and the Nature race in a few years, just like how he dealt with the Ice Fire race. Of course, the premise was that everything went smoothly. If something went wrong in the middle, it would be very difficult for him to improve to the level where he could deal with the demigods whose strength density was 80 times. Right now, he only had 34 times the strength density, and he had only cultivated to the 3rd round of the Celestial Nether 9 Absolutes. He would only be qualified to challenge such a strong race when he reached the 7th or 8th round, because the other party not only had a strength density higher than the strongest demigods of other races, but they also had the best training resources and the strongest fighting methods. They had the best quasi-divine source items, ancient god patterns, and so on. Therefore, even the demigods of the Nature race and the Oracle race, with 60 times the strength density, were much stronger than the strongest demigods of the Ice Fire race. Longyu might not be able to deal with them alone. That was the gap. Therefore, Longyu could only conserve his strength and reorganize his forces in the Ice Fire race's territory. Anyway, he had nothing urgent to do now, so he just needed to improve his strength first. When he had a plan, Longyu would go out and use various reasons to mobilize the cultivation resources of the ice-fire race. Most of these cultivation resources eventually entered his small world and became his capital for development. When he didn't have a plan of action, he would directly look for a secluded place without any people and activate the Ball of Netherworld to construct an area where the flow of time would be slowed down. Then, he would cultivate together with the other women. Red Oriole and Consort, you took turns managing the Sun Ting ancient territory. There was one person who had been training with Long Yu, and that was Yi Ziwei. Her secret method of training was very special, so it was best not to stop training unless it was necessary. With the help of Long Yu's area of slowing down the flow of time, Yi Ziwei's training speed was much faster than that of the other girls. After a year, she had almost reached 30 times the strength density. At this speed, she will definitely catch up to us. However, once she stops training, the speed of training will be slowed down until she is the same as a regular demigod. Long Yu was somewhat hesitant about that. In that case, it would be best for Yi Ziwei to directly train her strength density to 59 times. Her secret method of training was also 7 wheels and 7 levels, which could increase the strength density by 49 times in total. If she didn't train to the end in one go, it wouldn't be worthwhile no matter how he thought about it. In that case, Yi Ziwei couldn't participate in the battle before that. However, once she finished her training, she would be another expert by Long Yu's side. Her training speed might even surpass Long Yu's in the end. At the current speed, Yi Ziwei should be able to train to 59 times the strength density in 5 years. The secret method of training that she had modified was also the effect of Long Yu's area of slowing down the flow of time. Otherwise, it would have taken decades, or even hundreds of years. Even with such a secret method, if Yi Ziwei left Long Yu's area of slowing down the flow of time, she would need at least 60 years to train to the peak. If they were to stop midway, the time they would need to spend would almost double. If she stopped twice, the time needed to train would be doubled. That was why Long Yu tried his best to create a stable enough environment for Yi Ziwei's training. Now the ice-fire race was stable, and even if something happened, Yi Ziwei didn't need to fight. She only had one mission, and that was to train hard. That meant that Long Yu couldn't be away from her for more than 3 days, or the area of slowing down the flow of time wouldn't be able to be maintained around her. She was already a demigod. Naturally, she could bear the loneliness of training easily. Besides, Long Yu was basically by Yi Ziwei's side all the time, so there was no loneliness at all. After a year, not only was Yi Ziwei's strength density almost 30 times, but the others also made great progress. For example, Long Yu finally finished the 3rd round of the 9 Hells of Heavenly Seclusion and started the 4th round. In the meantime, he improved his compatibility with the Shadow Divine characters to level 15. In addition, his compatibility with the other Divine characters was only at the 7th level. The Shadow Divine characters were getting stronger and stronger. The other Divine characters were getting weaker and weaker, which was not a good state for Long Yu. However, if he didn't do that, the speed of training the 9 Hells of Heavenly Seclusion would be greatly reduced, and the loss outweighed the gain. He had trained the 4th round of the 9 Hells of Heavenly Seclusion twice, and his own strength density finally reached 39 times. One more time, and he would be able to cross a threshold. At this moment, he was much stronger than when he first came to the territory of the Ice-Fire race. The other girls had also reached 24 or 25 times, which was 3 or 4 times lower than Yi Ziwei's strength density. It didn't seem to be a big difference, but for regular demigods, a strength density of 3 or 4 times would mean decades of training. However, now that they had Long Yu to slow down the flow of time, they felt that their training speed was relatively faster. But it was only relative. In fact, their training time didn't decrease, but they were slower than those outside the area of slowing down the flow of time. One day in the outside world was 12 days in the area of slowing down the flow of time. Naturally, the effect was different. During the past year, new demigods appeared in the Sun Ting ancient realm. Man Xin was the first demigod to come out from the Sun Ting ancient realm. Then came Qihua, and the other 4,
who were Shi Yingwu, Shu Chan, Fu Xian, and Gu Yixian. The appearance of a total of 6 new demigods made Long Yu heave a sigh of relief. It seemed that the Sun Ting ancient realm was indeed extraordinary. No wonder the ice-fire race could be so powerful without declining. It was because they had 3 miracles. It was a pity that the miracles like the Sun Ting ancient realm were open for a long time. At least in a short time, Long Yu couldn't wait for other miracles to open. In order to make similar progress, he had to find another place and occupy the miracles in the territory of other alien races. However, it wasn't the right time to do that, because they had to take a rest first. The birth of the 6 new demigods gave Long Yu a new preparation, which was to find a temple. It happened to be in the territory of the ice-fire race. After the Sun Ting ancient realm was opened, there was a companion temple named the Sun Ting Temple, which was not far away from the Sun Ting ancient realm. A year after the opening of the Sun Ting ancient domain, this temple would open to the public. It's a pity that 26 of the 325 people who entered the Sun Ting ancient realm died in there and couldn't come out. However, this is a necessary path for cultivation. The death rate and the rate of new demigods have already surpassed the Eclipse ancient realm. After making a conclusion, Long Yu planned to let the 6 new demigods enter the Sun Ting temple and try to understand the secret methods of cultivation that suited them. As for himself, he wouldn't go in for now. Only 8 people could enter the Sun Ting temple at a time. Apart from the 6 new demigods, Long Yu let Red Oriole and Consort Yu in. Because the 2 girls have been managing the 325 people in the Sun Ting ancient realm for the past year, they had spent a lot of time calculating and receiving people. They didn't have the time to cultivate properly. The qualification to enter the Sun Ting temple would be their compensation. Long Yu preferred to see the other demigods improve together. Although he wanted to have strong people grow up and help him as soon as possible, he couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. It was worth mentioning that in the past year, Jitao had also recovered her strength density to 60 times. Compared to Long Yu, her overall strength was still a bit lower, but the gap was smaller than before. It was possible that Jitao's strength would surpass Long Yu's soon. Of course, Jitao still had a weakness, which was the lack of congenital techniques, which affected her comprehensive combat ability. But in other aspects, she was not much different from a regular demigod. From the records left by the demigods of the Ice-Fire race, Long Yu knew that the Ice-Fire race and the surrounding alien races had jointly developed some temples and miracles. The Eroding Moon ancient realm was a joint miracle of the 3 nearby star areas. But other than that, there were also some small miracles and some temples in the middle of the territories of the 2 races, which were all jointly developed. Just like the Rain God Temple that Long Yu entered before, it was owned by the 4 races together, and they agreed to enter it together. Although the races were definitely hostile to each other, they still needed to negotiate when they were in a deadlock. If they only used force, many problems couldn't be solved at all, and neither side would gain anything from it. In another year, a joint temple would be opened. Long Yu should start preparing for it now. The temple was very important to him. After all, he still didn't have a deified technique. Chapter 1694. The Temple of Clear Light would open in a year. This temple was jointly developed by the Ice-Fire tribe and 2 other tribes, a total of 3 tribes. It opened once every 18 years, and only 6 people could enter each time. The Ice-Fire race could enter 2 people every year. Different from other temples, the conditions to enter the Temple of Clear Light were different. In other temples, some new demigods could enter and learn the secret methods suitable for them. But the Temple of Clear Light was different. To enter this temple, one had to be a demigod with a power density of more than 30 times, and after entering, one would get a lot more benefits. To put it simply, the driving force in the Temple of Clear Light was stronger, and demigods could move farther in it. This made Long Yu a bit hesitant. He wanted to occupy the entire Temple of Clear Light, but the other 2 alien races wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Besides, he didn't have anyone with him who had reached a power density of 30 times. Now there were only two of them, Long Yu and Ji Tao. If it was just the two of them, they didn't need to fight for the other two alien races. In a year, Yi Ziwei was the only one who could reach a power density of 30 times. But Yi Ziwei didn't need to take risks in the temple. She just needed to keep cultivating. If she stopped now, it would take more than a year to raise her cultivation speed to the current level again. It was very likely that the loss outweighed the gain, unless she was very lucky in the Temple of Clear Light. But if that was the case, it would be more cost-effective to let someone else go. In a year, it'd be best if more people can reach a power density of 30 times. I have to be prepared for that. Long Yu thought to himself. Then he sent some spies to the other two alien tribes. These spies were all from the Icefire tribe. Even if something happened, Long Yu wouldn't feel the slightest bit of heartache. In the process of preparing for the Temple of Clear Light, everyone was constantly improving. The entire territory of the Icefire race was also thriving. There were even two descendants of the Ice God race who had broken through the shackles and became new demigods. According to the usual practice, the two new demigods should be able to enter the Sun Ting Temple within a year after the opening of the Sun Ting Ancient Domain. Of course, Long Yu wouldn't let them in. Instead, he brought them to a remote corner and killed them. This was the current situation of the Icefire race. Even if a new demigod showed up, it would be impossible for them to threaten Long Yu's existence. As for the public's excuse, he would say that the new demigods had been taken to another temple that he had developed with other species. No one would suspect anything in a short period of time. As for the future, why would Long Yu care so much? What happened in the future had nothing to do with Long Yu. Long Yu only wanted to stay in this place for a year or two. When he was almost done plundering the resources here, he could consider moving to the next race's territory. The opportunity that Long Yu chose was when the Temple of Clear Light opened. Then, he would take the other two races around the Icefire race into his pocket and control them. This was not an easy task. The two races both had a power density of more than 60 times, which was no weaker than the Icefire race. Although Long Yu had become stronger, it was inconvenient for him to act because he couldn't reveal his true identity. To fully exert his combat ability, he needed a detailed and thorough plan. Before the Temple of Clear Light opened, what Long Yu needed to do was to arrange everything and continue to improve his power density. As for the others, they didn't need to care so much. They just needed to keep cultivating. The internal affairs of the Icefire clan didn't need to worry about anything. Long Yu alone could handle it. There were a lot of things to do in the Icefire race, but Long Yu didn't need to pay attention to most of them. He only needed to entertain the creatures of the Icefire race who needed cultivation resources. So, overall, he wasn't very busy. In a day, apart from the basic 2 hours of rest, he still had 2/3 of his time left for cultivation. Just like that, half a year later, Jiang Shenwu finally made a breakthrough and improved the secret method of the Heavenly Nether 9 to the 3rd level of the 4th round. His power density had reached 40 times. Also, Long Yu's compatibility with the Shadow Runes had reached level 15, which basically increased the density of his power by 3 times. In a battle, together with his other methods, it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with the alien demigods whose power density was 60 times higher than his. The strongest demigod of the Icefire race was relatively weak after all. If it were other demigods whose power density was 60 times, they might have some trump cards and wouldn't have been killed by Long Yu so easily. At this moment, Long Yu had finished the battle plan for the Temple of Clear Light. He combined the current situation of the Icefire race and the situation of the other two races and came up with a battle plan. If everything went well, Long Yu would become the common ruler of the two alien races. As for the Icefire race, they would naturally be abandoned. The territory of the Icefire race would be occupied by the two alien races, the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race. Of course, the territory of the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race would belong to Long Yu completely. The cultivation resources that Long Yu would get would definitely not be less than what he plundered from the Icefire race. In this way, he would have more room for development. However, the corresponding risks were relatively high. If his true identity was exposed during the operation, it was possible that all the demons in the wild sand space zone would besiege him, which would be a nightmare for Long Yu and a direct conflict with his stable development plan. Of course, he had to do it. If Long Yu kept hiding in the territory of the Ice-Fire race, what was the difference between staying in the Void Galaxy and staying in the Ice-Fire race's territory? He must continue to work hard and strive to plunder enough cultivation resources to make himself stronger. Fortunately, the overall situation was not bad. The people in the Void Galaxy were also developing fast. With the addition of 6 new demigods, Long Yu was more confident about his own development. It wouldn't be long before he could return to the territory of the Human Clan and the Demon Clan. He wouldn't need to be afraid of the invasion of the Six-Winged race and the other 2 powerful races. When that day came, he would become the overlord of the 3 nearby space zones. However, the Six-Winged race, the Sword race, and the Machine race also have existences like me who have obtained the Golden Flame divine power. If they attack me, I might not be a match for them. After careful consideration, Long Yu knew that if he wanted to improve to that level, he had to explore the core space of the 5th level of the 9 Hell Steel. He had sensed that there should be a kind of divine power in the 5th level of the core space of the 9 Hell Steel. That was why he couldn't comprehend the Golden Flame divine power. When facing the powerful existences from the eroding Moon Ancient domain, comprehending the divine power was the most important thing. There's still half a year left. The plan has been arranged. The main problem is that there aren't enough people who can reach 30 times the strength density. It seems that I have to go out and work hard during this period. While thinking, Long Yu released a message to the other creatures of the Ice-Fire race that he was going to train in seclusion. Then, he activated the primordial bridge of rain and left the territory of the Ice-Fire race. His goal was to hunt alien demigods. Of course, his target wouldn't be the alien races nearby, because that would be too conspicuous. After all, with the primordial bridge of rain, it wouldn't take long for Long Yu to cross the entire wild sand space zone. Therefore, he directly passed through the territory of the oracles and the nature race and got to know the customs of the 2 strongest races in the wild sand space zone. Then, he went to the other side of the wild sand space zone. There are also a lot of powerful alien demigods on this side. There were quite a lot of alien demigods with 50 times the strength density. They were just enough for Long Yu to feed the ball of Tartareth. Right now, the Saint Emperor was in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. Together with Red Oriole's seed of Blood Spirit, anything that happened in the territory of the Ice-Fire race couldn't escape Long Yu's attention. If the situation was urgent, he could return with the primordial bridge of rain quickly. As long as he didn't leave the territory of the wild sand space zone, the territory of the Ice-Fire race wouldn't be in any danger. Then, Long Yu's hunting began. His target wasn't always in one alien race's territory. Instead, he wandered around and basically targeted the alien demigods with more than 30 times the strength density. Every time he killed a demigod, he would leave the alien race and go to the next alien race's territory to hunt. After only 1 month, Long Yu killed 30 alien demigods, all with more than 30 times the strength density, and he successfully improved his ball of Tartareth. The effect of slowing the flow of time by 13 times, not enough. Long Yu didn't stop hunting. He moved to the side of the wild sand space zone and started hunting. Since the alien races did not communicate with each other, nobody connected Long Yu to the demigods of the alien races after he killed them. Of the 30 alien demigods, Long Yu had hunted the demigods of every race once, including the oracles and the naturals. Some demigods were killed by Long Yu too. If Long Yu kept killing, he would attract attention, but it was impossible for him to be connected. It meant that no matter how he killed, he wouldn't get into trouble as long as he didn't expose his real identity. 14 times, 15 times, it's about time to go back. On average, Long Yu killed 2 or 3 demigods for each alien race. Among the oracles and the naturals, he even picked up 5 or 6. After all, they had the most demigods whose power density was more than 30 times higher than his. When Long Yu successfully swallowed the ball of Tartareth and slowed the flow of time by 15 times, he finally decided to stop and return to the territory of the ice-fire race. Then, he trained with the girls, making the final sprint for the opening of the Temple of Clear Brilliance. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.